So thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode after 3 weeks in which I talk about issues related to public transportation and people visiting. So it was weekend, so 2 Saturdays were missed. But now we're back. And we're going to talk about intercity trains and high-speed trains across international borders. And this is going to be focused in Europe, but I hope to also talk about North America a little bit. So here's something that I do not know whether there are good visuals for, but it is important to understand. For example, let's just do high-speed rail in Europe and hope that it's going to get me what I want. Let's also meanwhile do this and hope that I get the Wikipedia article that I want. Okay, this. Okay, so something that I obviously do not care about is passenger air travel in 2021, right? All right, I mean that's maybe not the best representation of air travel. Okay, this is exactly what I want. Yes. Right, because maybe I want this on the eve of Corona, and this is great. This is data from 2018, no Corona in sight. Awesome. I would like, first of all, so again, this is air, and we're going to look at rail in a moment. And I would like to point something out to people, which is that basically all of these are within the same country. Now, I do want to caution something that this is single airport to single airport. Note that they're saying airport, airport. So it's not Tokyo to Sapporo, it's Tokyo Haneda to Sapporo, which is fine because Narita is only for, or almost only for international travel. So this does overprivilege single airport cities. For example, Beijing is a single airport city. Shanghai is not, but it's the same kind of. It's a normal Asian thing or East Asian thing where you have the domestic, where you have big domestic and big international. So these are domestic things mostly, which are things like Beijing to Shanghai, and these are going to go to Hongqiao and not to Pudong. Chengdu, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. Likewise, Tokyo Haneda rather than Narita. Seoul Gimpo, not Incheon. And this again is so. Bear in mind the Asianness and I guess the Australianness of this is to some extent an artifact of the fact that in North America and Europe, the biggest cities tend to be multi-airport. So JFK and Newark are split. London's airports are split. There are yes, most international stuff flies into Heathrow and Gatwick, but there are actually quite a lot of international traffic flying into Gatwick. Can you still hear me? Because I keep getting the do I want to change the color scheme saying that my computer is doing as a kind of Italian strike demanding to go to school. This is by the way where you're saying things like New York JFK to Los Angeles. Because there are a bunch of NY airports, right? You have JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia. And LA has 5 airports. You have LAX, you have Burbank, you have Ontario, you have Santa Ana, I think the one is called Bob Hope, and you got Long Beach. However, the smaller airports tend to be for smaller planes, so and for shorter routes. So it just so happens that the NYLA trips tend to be JFK to LAX, which is why it's the first in America. I can actually show you domestic US data. It's called the Consumer Airfare Report. I have it on my computer somewhere. And it should be called Table 6, but I may have changed the name. It might be Table 1, actually. If I can't find it, I will just look for. I will. So the point is that These are mostly domestic. Um, this is taking forever. This is not what I was intended to, what I was intending to do. Um, so there's a table that gives you the exact uh, travel volumes with fares because it's about fare comparisons between any pair of American city regions, and it lumps airports together. So it's going to lump JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia. It's going to lump LAX and Ontario and so on. So that's really useful. And the top in the United States is either LASF, which is also one of the top here. It's three airports here: SF, Oakland, San Jose, and five on the LA side. And this is not terribly dominant. I believe that all of them together are about 7 million at the eve of Corona, and then you have New York, Miami, also 7 million. So again, I mean, not the top, which is Sol Jojo, but pretty close to the top. And if this is going to be something different from what I thought it was going to be, I will be very sad. Also, I try to exit, and if it opens and then exits, I will also be sad. Nope, this is not what I wanted. This is county commuting. Um, wait, where is it? I mean, okay, because it's going to be here. Um, okay, so it's going to be table 6, 2018. Okay. And if it's not here, then it should be in downloads. Yep, this is so this is going to be 1 quarter, and the numbers are going to be per day, not per year. So multiply by 365. So the top is LASF. By the way, if you're wondering why, so let's also sort this by passengers and not by whether it is substitutable by high-speed rail. We want to sort by passengers and then let's say by length. So data sort by passengers, uh, length, and it's going to be in miles, and then by the first city. And hope that it is not going to be okay. So the top is LA, San Francisco. This is 25. This is uh, 9 million a year. So it's going to be one of the top in the world. Then you have Miami, New York. For some reason, they do not consider West Palm Beach to be part of Miami. Oh, no. No, this says entire cells. It's not entire cell. Yeah, so you need to add this, which is 523 and add it to New York, Miami. So it's number 2. It used to be number 1. There were old Brookings reports that you can read from the 2000s when people were starting to think about high-speed rail seriously in the Obama era. But now it's number 2. It's 7.7. And so you see all these domestic routes, New York, LA, which is also huge when you count all the airports, much bigger than the Wikipedia single airport table, and much bigger, 5.1. So this is stuff that's entirely domestic. They have different tables for international in the United States. And the point is that these are practically always domestic. We can literally pick out the international here. It's Hong Kong, Taipei. And again, there is single airport bias in this. So something like New York, London is going to be discounted because multi airports. I believe New York, London is together maybe like New York, LA, or a little bit less. So maybe that looks like it's on a par, but that's very special. New York, Paris is way down. New York, Toronto is, I believe, a million or maybe a little bit more than a million. And just as a reminder, Toronto is a metropolitan area about the same size as Miami. It's closer to New York than Miami, but the road network between New York and Toronto is rather shit. because you have interstate. Because the issue is that you have interstates, but the interstates wrap around the lake, and that's gonna also somewhat complicate high-speed rail planning. So here is how one drives from New York City to Toronto. I did ask for the road over. Okay, I'm getting the road overlay. Awesome. Uh, so you don't go whoop like you fly. You go up the Hudson roughly, then roughly along the water level route, then around the lake, and then you need to deal with the approaches getting into and out of New York, because cars, New York, cars, New York, cars, New York. Yeah. So the upshot is that you should expect it to be at least vaguely comparable to, let's say, New York, Miami, maybe New York, maybe okay. People don't fly to Toronto for vacation the way they do to Miami. Miami overshoots like crazy. Okay, New York, Chicago. Okay, Chicago is vaguely comparable distance to Toronto. Chicago, we probably don't want a car in city center, but that's equally true of Toronto. New York to Chicago is 4.7. New York to Toronto is, again, I believe, about 1 or maybe 1.3. So people just don't fly internationally as much as they fly domestic. Again, New York, London is a little bit of an exception because so this is O&D. This is something really important. This table, not the Wikipedia table, this table is O&D. So if I fly New York to San Diego via Atlanta, I'm not counted as New York, Atlanta, and an Atlanta, San Diego trip. I'm counted as a single trip, New York to San Diego. This is going to be really important because you can kind of say that Atlanta barely is a thing here. I mean, yeah, there's New York to Atlanta, but Atlanta, as a reminder, Hartsfield is the world's busiest airport. Maybe it recently got overtaken by Beijing or something, certainly because of Corona. But this is 2018. In 2018, there's a world's busiest airport, and it's very clearly Hartsfield. And yes, it's because Atlanta is a single airport city, but Atlanta still has, I think, maybe the third busiest airspace in the world. I think it goes something like London, then New York, then Atlanta, because of the Delta hub. And Atlanta just is not very well represented here. Certainly no more than you would expect based on its rather hefty size. And the reason is that this is O&D. The New York London numbers, which will be here somewhere. Again, they're going to get buried because the New York London. Because, okay, so this is what they're saying about New York London. Okay, this is flights. Okay, so this is airport to airport, and this is 3 million, which is not terrible. And again, it's going to be more when you include things like Gatwick. But this is not O&D. So if I fly New York to Nice, which I did many times, and I connect in London, I'm counted as a New York-London trip. If I'm flying London to an American city and I connect to JFK, I count as a New York-London trip. So it's kind of a funnel, like with international gateways on both sides. And then you got New York Paris already, which is also like that but less, and it's already half as much. And New York Frankfurt does not even appear. So a lot of so there's just less international air traffic than domestic, relative to how big the cities are. I mean, you might notice something on this list. Uh, on this list, something that is not currently seen, at least at the top, maybe if I scroll down, you'll see it, is Tokyo to Seoul. Now, part of it is that Tokyo to Seoul is a multi-airport route because there are flights both Narita to Incheon and Haneda to Gimpo. But even then, Tokyo is a vast. Tokyo is a vast city. Seoul is a vast city. They're actually at pretty close distance for each other. They're ideal for flights. Why is Tokyo to Osaka one of the top. It makes sense. Osaka is also vast. Just as a reminder, there's high-speed rail between these two cities. High-speed rail has like a very large model split. I think it's 80. I think the aerial model split is 80% rail, 20% air. So this is what is left after you net out the many people who more reasonably prefer 2.5 hour Shinkansen trip to flying this. Uh, and where's Tokyo to Seoul? Seoul is a bigger city than Osaka. Um, why do I need to scroll down so far? Uh, okay, now I'm seeing Seoul to Osaka. Okay, great. And look at how buried this is. Um, I don't think Tokyo to Seoul is even on this list. And this is there's just less internet. So again, you could just play with this table a little bit. Play with U.S. Canada. Play with the international things here that people talk about. Or this. Uh, so you see, finally, they're doing things that are multi-city a little bit in Europe with Eurostat. And yeah, this does boost things like London Dublin to some extent. Um, but why is London? London and Paris, yeah, it's partly competing with Eurostar, but where's London, Berlin, for example? Um, and so it's just a matter of people not flying very much internationally. Uh, there's just so I have this. How does the statistic count flights? It doesn't. Flights. You mean flights that are trains? It doesn't. A flight is a flight. This is just flights. I don't care about the air code. Um, so I wrote this blog post called "International and Underperform," and I want to make it very clear that it's not that people just don't like visiting other countries. It's just that the system kind of sucks for this. So this is the high-speed rail situation. Uh, I'm going to try to wrangle with the SVG and then give up and then make it PNG. Thank you, Wikipedia, for working so well. And so that might not be clear. So let's do Sweden first, just because I live there. So start from Stockholm and look at where the fast lines go. And so yellow means 200, orange means 250, red means 300, purple means 320. So there's 200 that goes up to Uppsala and then all the way to Umeå, going to the north, to 2 points north. Don't jar the gun. There is the main western railway that goes to Göteborg, and there's the one that goes to Malmö. And you might notice something, which is that it's not really going to Oslo. I mean, yes, you can piggyback on the line to Göteborg, but once you hit Oslo, suddenly the trains go slow. I believe Stockholm to Oslo is 5.5 hours, maybe. Um, so they just don't invest in this very much. And again, this is Sweden and Norway, two countries that the fact that they're two different countries and not one country is an entirely historical. It's essentially a historical accident, and they try to have this kind of pan-Scandinavian nationalism, and instead of doing that, they realign their legal systems, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and they speak essentially the same language. They're to the point that in Brunn, the TV series called The Bridge, uh, the Swedes speak Swedish and the Danes speak Danish. And yes, they joke that the Danes speak too fast and it's hard to understand, but they still understand each other. Yeah, so this is trip times between Stockholm and Oslo. Uh, yeah, 6 hours. Is Oslo? Is Oslo S correct? Yes, because in Norwegian they spell center with an S, not with a C like normal people. So I'm gonna get to John Worth in a little bit. Um, um, so anyway, so the point is that they just don't invest very much, except in very special circumstances, like Malmö to Schopenham. How about I stop calling a city Schopenham when it is not the name of the city in its own language, in English, or in the country that I live in? Schopenham is the Swedish name. And if you think this is bad, at one point in Stockholm, I said things like Schopenhagen. So in Copenhagen, because it's so close to Malmö, they invested in making the trains between them nice and maybe running through. So in theory, Stockholm to Copenhagen works okay. I mean, the problems are that it's still kind of far, and I think Stockholm to Malmö is 4.5 hours or something like that. So it's not amazing, but you can do that. But it's a piggyback on a domestic route to Malmö. Like with Eurostar, things that you can actually use Eurostar for are okay. You can do London Paris and London Brussels, which are the original use cases. But beyond that, it kind of sucks. And of course, it's not just the trains. It's not just a question of does the train exist. So yes, between Paris and London, does the train exist? Absolutely yes. Between Paris and Brussels, does the train exist? Absolutely. But at what frequency and at what price and with what conveniences? So if you've ever taken Eurostar, you know that it does not work like normal European trains. Here's how a normal European train works. Okay, let's say completely hypothetically that I live in Paris and I have a friend who is in who is visiting Saarbrücken to go to a Klingon language conference, hypothetically, purely hypothetically, of course, and that while I speak no Klingon at all, except for the lyrics of "Never Gonna Give You Up" in Klingon. Um, Daydream not coming, daydream not. Oh, yeah, this one. So I don't even know how these words parse. However, I know I may be interested in conlanging in general. So let's say I completely hypothetically again uh, visit Saarbrücken from Paris, and it's a day trip because Saarbrücken is not depicted on the map, but it's here. So I take this fancy fast line, and then it branches off, and yeah, this bit is slow, but this bit is very short. It's an hour 47 each way. So here's how it goes normally. Okay, I show up at Gare de l'Est. I'm stressed for time, as is often the case. I appear in the main station hall 4 minutes before the train is scheduled to depart. I leisurely walk over to a ticket machine, having already bought a ticket. I insert, I think, my card or something, or insert a code, uh, print the ticket on site, and leisurely walk onto the platform, and I have 2 minutes to spare. Total trip time, door to door, was, I mean, not door to door, door to station, was maybe 20 minutes from my apartment to Gare de l'Est. 4 minutes of wait because to print, and two because I did not get on the train as it was leaving. I did have 2 minutes of spare time, and then an hour 47. Now, so this is how things work in advanced, developed, first world countries with governments that from time to time function and that spend their resources not just on moral panics against public enemy number one. Nowadays, it's called Islamo-leftism in France, but also, or against the EU, but also in maybe providing a service to the public from time to time. I.e., countries that are definitely not the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, here's how it works, and this is also exported to the French side of Eurostar. You show up at the train station. There's a long line. You do passport check because Britain thinks that joining Schengen is going to turn Britain into a province of the Nazi Empire or something. Uh, then you do, but there's also security because they are worried that you can hijack the train and then divert it to fly into the London Shard, 9/11 style. And all of these things together, in theory, add half an hour. In practice, they add more than that because as soon as the train gets crowded, it becomes much more than that, maybe an hour, even an hour and a half, if things break down, which they did when I did that. Um, so you can kind of imagine that it's just a sucky experience, right? Because it's not just I'm sitting for an extra hour on a train being slow. I'm standing an hour in multiple lines for because British people think that queuing is the basis of their civilization, which, to be fair, to some extent, is better than what Germans think, which is that cutting in line is the basis of German civilization. However, maybe a middle ground between Britain and Germany, let's call it France. Um, yeah, okay. So, yeah, same thing you might see with cycles. You might see this. Oh my God, we go as a 30. Oh, right. Yeah, I keep forgetting. Remember, I did caveat my point about France being semi well governed with the word like semi or from time to time or not just moral panics. Yes. Thank you for the highlight of why SNCF, while it's had a revenue collapse thanks to the discounted fares of Ouigo, it has not managed to actually increase ridership. So the point is, the infrastructure sucks for trains. Now, I did start this by pointing out planes. Planes don't care about infrastructure like that. I mean, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, okay. So there isn't a fast train between France and Germany unless you're going to Karlsruhe. But anyway, and this is I don't know why they. I think this might be an under construction color. If that is incorrect, there's no high speed rail under construction between Mannheim and Saarbrücken. This is definitely under construction. This is the line. This is the approach from Berlin to Dresden. It's a 20-minute delay because there used to be four tracks here: two S-Bahn, two intercity. The two intercity tracks were removed by the Soviets as war reparations, and then people didn't care because the tracks would lead to West Berlin anyway. Then the wall falls down, and people realize, oh wait, shit, we need to four track this. It's 30 years later, and now they're finally doing it because planning in Germany is very fast. So at any rate, yeah, this is not correct to portray as under construction. I don't know why they're doing that. This is definitely under construction. This is under construction. This is under construction. This is high speed too. This should not be on this list. Um, this is under construction. So, so the point is, with planes, however, the fares are kind of brutal. And I do want to point something out, okay? London to Dublin does not look like it has an international malus. London to Amsterdam, it is unclear. So you can take Eurostar between London and Amsterdam. It is going to be very circuitous. You might also notice something about the infrastructure sucking while we're at it, talking about international infrastructure for trains. Paris to Paris, Lille, Lille, London, Lille, Brussels, Paris, Brussels. Lille is on the London side of the leg, so Paris, Brussels does not stop in Lille or go through Lille. These are pretty fast, right? Because red. This is a gray, but it's 160 kilometers an hour on Eurostar. This is gray as well. This is not a fast line because Belgium doesn't care, right? Belgium likes its fast trains to Paris. They are overpriced for the benefit of business people in Brussels who want to take a train to Paris away from the hoi polloi and are rather bummed that then they get to Gare du Nord and they see black people in and just outside the train station when they try to hail a cab because they are afraid of the metro. So for the maybe general public who might be traveling Paris to Antwerp, they don't care. Paris to Liège. So, for example, they have a big delay just in Brussels because because the infrastructure through Brussels is incredibly slow. And then this is the 200 color, but the average speed is pretty low. Paris to Leuven, not Paris, Brussels to Leuven. This is, I think, 200. This might be 280 and not 300. I'm not sure, but it's also this is colored as if it's high speed rail, but it's a very slow line at the level of average speed. Like the average speeds on this section are maybe 130 kilometers an hour. Brussels to Köln, for example, it's rather slow because they did not really care about the cross-border investment from Brussels to Germany, because the point of Eurostar and the tunnel infrastructure on Thalys is just to connect the capital. And yes, there is Thalys that gets you from Paris to Amsterdam, but first of all, this, despite being red, is again rather low average speed. If you're the Netherlands, why do you care about average speed? This is the size of the Netherlands. It's small. I mean, it's the smallest country that ever smalled. Their actual domestic investments are much more Swiss-like. So, I mean, sure, maybe if you care about international roll and roll off, then you'll build a base tunnel, but you're not going to do domestic high-speed rail. You're going to maybe do some 200 kilometers an hour bypasses like this, from Olten to Bern. But otherwise, you just care about frequency, about interconnections. This is essentially just a solve. And actually, so because we talk a lot about construction costs, one of the motivating examples for the theory of premature commitment coming out of the Netherlands to explain their construction cost overruns is specifically the decision to build high-speed rail here, which the authors claim, and I mostly agree, was not just a matter constrained them to the point that they probably should have been able to say, we don't actually need this, we can go 250 or even 200 and not 300 kilometers an hour. And so, and even though they went 300, the average speed here is meh. The average speed here sucks. Paris to Amsterdam, I believe, is 3 hours something, maybe 350. So, it's not a terribly useful thing at very high speed. London Amsterdam is going to be that, plus also all of the annoyance of having to deal with Eurostar immigration, Eurostar control. From Amsterdam to Paris, 3 hours 13. It's not terrible or anything, but it's 500 kilometers. That's not a good average speed for 500 for almost 500 kilometers, right? I mean, it's 150 something. Which in Germany you get on mixed lines, on lines that are mixed high and low speed, like Berlin to Munich. But the point is that here, these mixed lines, the low speed parts, are actually legacy lines that have been upgraded. It's not like in the, like, know that here, everything here is a newly built high speed line except a tiny segment from Brussels to Antwerp. And yes, that slows down, but that's not the difference between 2 hours and 3 hours. And then Berlin to Munich, the yellow bit is upgraded. This is new, upgraded, new, upgraded. So why does new have the same average speed? Again, it's just stuff about them not caring very much about making the international connections fastly. A lot of it is the fault of Belgium and the slowdowns in Brussels, but not exclusively. Why does NCF thinks of DB's comfort chicken? I have no idea what comfort chicken is. The way I write trains here is I use an e-ticket and then I downloaded it on my phone and then I show up at the train station. And if and it used to be that I might want 10 minutes to buy a cookie. However, I'm not taking my mask off any time indoors, so no cookie anymore, unfortunately. Maybe we'll get cookies when I get off the train at the other end. Oh, yeah, I do know about these local stops. It's just that even on the express stops, they're just slow segments. I mean, if you zoom in, you can kind of see that Brussels to Leuven is rather slow because why would they want to skip Leuven? It's only for international trains, and they're not trying to target Brussels to Köln. So a lot of the stuff that is not being targeted. And remember, flights are kind of the same. Domestically within the US, there's a lot of competition. Flight ticket prices are very low, and then even crossing the border into Canada, suddenly the flight tickets get very expensive. For example, in Vancouver, actually, there's quite a number of people flying into the United States. Instead of flying out of Vancouver, they drive across the border to Bellingham, and they fly from Bellingham to be inside the American system, which is a lot cheaper, to the point that the main users of Bellingham Airport are, at least were before Corona, Canadians. And this was actually discussed, I think, on Jared Walker's excellent blog, Human Transit. Uh, so Not Walker. Walker. Oh, when I confirm. Oh, okay, yeah. Huh. Sure, whatever. I mean, I also, I mean, maybe it would be different for me because I also need to show them a bank account because I have a 25% off bank account. But anyway, so the point, so Jarrett lives in Portland. He is rooted in the Pacific Northwest of the United States and also in Australia and New Zealand. He worked in Auckland and Sydney, I believe. And I believe it was in his blog that he was talking about small town things. And one point, I think he was talking about Bellingham. And I don't think it was he who said that. Maybe someone in comment, or maybe he was quoting someone else. But ooh, cool. But what he said is that with Bellingham, there were questions about why the Bellingham bus system does not serve the airport, and the agency explained, look, the airport is rarely used by Bellingham residents. It's mostly used by Canadians using it as cheap flights to the rest of the United States. So this is a thing that is such a big thing that you can literally point out to it driving certain transportation patterns. And again, it's in a small city like Bellingham. Bellingham is tiny, okay, but Bellingham, this is Bellingham. Actually, I've never been to Bellingham unless you count crossing the border on a bus where they make you walk across the border because they hate you. Okay, this is Bellingham is going to be this one. But but I actually know people who used to live there. Maybe they still live there. Boston Loppers who live there. Um, and so um, with flights, Europe wide, it's not as much of a thing, right? Because Europe wide, maybe it's the other way around. Because uh, domestically we have high speed rail. Well, domestically, we have intercity rail. So there's very little reason for you to ever fly domestically in most of Europe, right? Again, not all of Europe, because, for example, I think people still fly Berlin to Stuttgart. They're trying to get people to stop flying things like Hamburg to Stuttgart or Berlin to Stuttgart or things like that. But some people fly it. Again, not everyone. On the eve of Corona, actually, flights like domestic flights in Germany were already cratering. Essentially, people realized, wait, we have the Greta protests. Let's stop flying because we absolutely can take the trains. Maybe it's 5 hours, but it's 5 hours on a train. That's fine. Sweden had the same effect, purely domestic, because yeah, you can slog on a train for 4.5 hours, Stockholm to Malmö. And I say slog, 4.5 hours is about the break-even point between air and rail for the median traveler, or Stockholm to Luleå, things like that. But you're not going to do that for Stockholm to Berlin, right? I mean, this does not yet exist. I actually knew a Berliner when I lived in Stockholm. I knew one of my office mates was a transplanted Berliner who hated flying and would actually do it by train whenever there was time. And it was, I think it was a, I forget whether it was an all day trip, so morning to night, or whether it required breaking it with like an overnight in Hamburg or something. And so Stockholm to Berlin, people fly because the trains. London to Amsterdam. Let's go out of HSO's site. Please correct me if I'm mangling the Dutch language too much. London to Amsterdam, it's pretty big. Again, I can't quite tell how big it should be because Amsterdam is weird in that it is not one city; it is four cities, right? I mean, people don't. I mean, if I'm visiting Rotterdam, what airport do I use? The answer is Schiphol. If I'm visiting Utrecht, what airport do I use? The answer is Schiphol. If I'm visiting Amsterdam, what airport do I use? I mean, obviously Schiphol. So maybe that's just a giant city for airport purposes. Maybe it's the entirety of Randstad. But this is comparable. There's actually maybe a little bit more than the peak Paris to London air volume before Eurostar opened. So pretty decent to be honest, because we have a Europe-wide market for low-cost airlines, which started actually from London, Dublin, actually in Europe. So if you guys don't know, yeah, road to Stockholm. Yeah, I would do it by train as well. And I would so actually the way I moved to Berlin, yeah, that might boost numbers, but I don't know if it boosts between the two airports. Maybe if they're screwing you on flight ticket prices if you do direct, but if I live in a deindustrialized, like if I'm living in Birmingham or something, then yeah, sure, maybe I'm going to fly via Heathrow or via Frankfurt or via Schiphol or via Charles de Gaulle. But if I live in London, I do not need any of these other airports. I live in London. I can go wherever I want. Hell, even in Berlin, I can get direct flights to New York. In Paris, same thing. In Paris, I did not fly through London. Why would I fly through London? I lived in Paris. I could get direct flights from Charles de Gaulle to wherever I wanted. Um, I could even get cheap flights direct from Charles de Gaulle to wherever I wanted because I am not because I travel low season and I'm not fussy about dates. So I just pick whatever the fare calendar shows me a flight, and then I feel cucked if I ever have to pay more than $500 round trip. Um, so uh, oh God, really? Gdansk to Warszawa? What the Poland? Um, Are there, by the way, Tony, are there flights between Praga and Brno? Yeah. For Köln and Düsseldorf. I mean, so Köln and Düsseldorf both have flights, and I actually know someone who lived in the U.S. while their partner was postdocing in Essen, and they were flying to Düsseldorf, and somehow the flight sucked, and I had to. Oh, nice. So I had to show them how they could actually fly through Köln was cheaper, or they could fly through Frankfurt and it was cheaper. Even I think direct JFK to Frankfurt would be cheaper, and then ICE up to Essen. Uh, but anyway, so yeah, in the Rhineland, and I don't mean Rhine, I mean Rhineland. So from Rhine up the river to like Basel and such, you can just fly to Frankfurt and connect wherever. Um, yeah, exactly. I mean, there are flights between New York and Philadelphia. You are not going to see them on the stable because who the hell in their right mind would fly New York to Philadelphia direct? But there are repositioning flights. So you live in Philly and you're using New York as your hub, or you're living in New York and you're using Philly as your hub because you have miles on U.S. Airways back when that was a thing. Um, or likewise, lots of flights New York Boston. It's not commonly O&D. New York Boston. Boston DC, absolutely. Boston DC is one of the top air markets in America. I think it might be the top air market in America that involves neither New York nor Los Angeles, right? Because let me check this right. LA, NY, NY to LA, NY, 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 LA, NY. Yeah, this is number one, two, three. This is the ninth in America and the top that does not involve New York or LA, although SF to Seattle is on flat. And then SF San Diego. Anyway, so my point is that the flights kind of suck internationally, but not within certain parts of Europe where Ryanair is very aggressive. And actually, London Dublin is where Ryanair started. So the rule was that you had is that we I did not live in Europe at the time. We had regulations at the member state level. So if you wanted to do, and again, but there was also in the 80s already an incipient high-speed rail system in France, for example. Uh, and flights were also more expensive, so I think people just took trains long distances domestically. And then but for flights between countries, there were national regulations, and countries wanted to protect their expensive national airlines. And then it was actually something that Thatcher started. So the EU passed some kind of law that required double refusal, which in English meant that if you wanted to fly between two countries, you required between two EU member states, you needed the approval of only one of the two member states, not both. Because normally to fly internationally, you need the approval of both countries. This is why the market is less competitive. There's a lot of protectionism of existing players, plus a lot of bullshit surplus extraction. We will be very happy to let you fly, but here are some petty economic development goals that we expect you to give money to. So the EU made it streamlined, and then when Ryanair wanted to operate between London and Dublin, Ireland said no because they want to protect Aer Lingus, but the UK, I'm forgetting whether it was still Thatcher or Thatcher had just been overthrown. Thatcher said yes, so they could start operating, and they didn't fly into Heathrow because it was too congested, so they flew into Stansted, and this is kind of where the European side of the low cost revolution comes from. And British Airways was livid at this, but I mean, what were they going to do? So so the point is that within Europe, where we have lower rates, suddenly you're actually getting decent international connections. I mean, decent. I have never flown Ryanair that I remember, or EasyJet, but I know people who have. It's an experience. Um, I guess it's like you're paying, I don't know, 100 euros or something for a long-term flight. And I mean, if you're going to like a dominatrix or something, I think the dominatrix is going to charge. How much do pro doms charge? I think 150, 200 maybe for a session. So, I mean, actually, it's cheaper masochism than like going to a pro dom, but I mean, maybe it's more, maybe it's equally fun for people who are that masochistic. I don't know, but I mean, the experience is pretty brutal, and it's brutal in a very unpredictable way. So, so they will find excuses to tell you, oh, right, your luggage weighs 300 grams over our limit, and therefore we are charging you another 150 euros in bag fees totals. Um, yeah. I mean, they're always the promotional fares that are very cheap. I mean, the average person from Edinburgh to Sevilla does not pay 14. Um, they actually checked this when they did the high-speed rail review in France, the Spinetta report, Spinetta Axe. I rest my case, color. Yeah, so Ryanair averages operating costs, I believe, 4 or 5 cents per passenger kilometer, but that's in euros, not dollars. Uh, and yeah, and EasyJet is maybe a little bit more expensive because EasyJet is otherwise like Ryanair, but will actually look for more central airports. Um, because like the whole strategy is how Southwest started by flying out of Dallas Love Field and not Dallas Fort Worth. So it looked for a smaller airport, was specifically a smaller airport that was closer to city center than the big one that replaced it. And because it was not as much of a thing here as in America, Ryanair had to innovate by going to small and out of the way airports like Paris Beauvais or Stansted, or for EasyJet it's Luton. But so EasyJet tries more to get into the more central airports. Um, so the point is that the fares suck, but maybe with Ryanair and EasyJet, the fares suck less, and at any rate, the experience sucks the same domestically or internationally. So we're starting to see heftier international volumes. So it's not that there's no demand for international trips. There's the supply is constrained for different reasons for air and rail. For rail, it's just because they don't care to build it. So Paris to to Saarbrücken is about an hour 47. Saarbrücken to Frankfurt is another 2 hours because uh, so this is yellow, but I do not know whether it deserves to be yellow. Maybe it's 200, but it's so this is I think 40-ish minutes, or 45 minutes, and they're trying to cut it to about half an hour to do this in half an hour and this in half an hour and fit it into some kind of knot system. And then this should be an hour, but it's a few minutes slower for reasons that are actually decently fixable. Again, a lot of it is they don't care, or they think that trains have the same performance specs in 2021 that they did in 1991. But that's neither here nor there. The main problem is just don't build this, and don't care to. And actually something that this frustration. So John Worth actually. So you told me before about John Worth. So this guy named John Worth. This guy. Um, he lives here. I'm forgetting where he's from. Uh, okay, so he's British. Yeah, that's what I thought. He writes a lot about international railways, and the thing is, there's just not a lot of investment in high-speed rail. The coalition essentially put the kibosh on further investment in high-speed rail beyond existing plans. And again, existing plans are not nothing. Existing plans, again, this is not on them, but this connection, which is again, it's 20. I mean, it's annoying urban bullshit, but it's 20-minute speed up to Dresden. Stuttgart to Ulm. I think they're also going to do Ulm to Augsburg. Um, Fixing this to be faster. So like this entire thing is going to end up yellow. From Mannheim to Basel. Zurich is not on the map, unfortunately. This should be an hour. I think it's maybe two. Um, so this segment, the squiggly thing between is it between it's between Hannover and Bielefeld. That is going to get fixed. They're going to do from Bielefeld to not to Dortmund because that would be too base. They're only going to go as far as Hamm. So Hannover to Dortmund should be an hour, but instead they're going to do Hannover Hamm in an hour. Uh, and so again, they are investing. They just are under investing, unfortunately. And the stuff they're investing in is they're not really caring about crossing the border better. So something that they should probably be doing is fixing this. So that Köln to Brussels, just you can even see this on the map. I mean, there's distortion, but it's not intense distortion at this scale, right? So we can kind of see that Köln to Brussels is the same length as Paris to Lille. Uh, this is about an hour. This is, I believe, more than 2 hours. This is an hour, but it's not a very fast high-speed line despite the color. Berlin to Leipzig actually is an hour 12. The average speed of Berlin to Leipzig is very good because it's entirely upgraded. Berlin to Hamburg is actually pretty fast. Berlin to Hanover is decently fast. And then this is just slow ass, even by upgraded standards. So they should probably fix this so that Paris to Köln gets better. I mean, ideally this should be 2.5 hours. I mean, 3 would be nice though. They should make this so that Paris to Frankfurt, instead of being an hour 47 here and then another 2 hours, the entire thing should ideally be 2:30. If you can't, then maybe do it in 2:45. 3 hours I would complain about. It's kind of see if you insist on going through Mannheim, but why would you go through Mannheim? Like there's no, I mean, Mannheim is not a large city. Mannheim is not on the way to anything. So again, this is not under construction. And they should build something there, but I also don't think that they should build Mannheim to this. And the reason, so here's the explanation. So this is just me like doing slight crayoning, drawing lines on a map in a way that's different from the current plan. So the way the trains go is there's Saarbrücken, and then they meander on the legacy line through Kaiserslautern. Maybe it's actually going to be faster if you do open rail. So I don't need this anymore. Okay, I got open railway map. No, you do not get to see my location. So red is high speed. So we're going from Paris to, so if it's domestic, there's high speed rail. Essentially, so the only major French cities that are not connected to Paris by high speed rail are Toulouse, which is about to be connected, and Nice, which is having problems because the terrain here sucks. Um, so you go west, so they go east, sorry, from Paris to Strasbourg, or you cross the border, you go Fripp, and yeah, this is very slow, but it's also very short to Saarbrücken. And then you meander on this very slow line through Kaiserslautern, and then Mannheim, and then from Mannheim you go up to Frankfurt. Now here's a fun fact for you. The busiest line, so the busiest line in Europe, the busiest passenger line in Europe is the shared segment of the high-speed train from Paris to this bifurcation, where some trains divert to Dijon and forgetting whether the trains to Basel also divert or if they go like this. But definitely the Dijon trains, and then most of them continue on to Lyon. So this is the busiest thing in Europe, but actually, this is a close second, Frankfurt to Mannheim. This is why they're building they're actually planning to build a high speed line along this alignment, not just for speed but also for capacity. And even that line's going to fill quick if they have better trains, because if they actually get good trains and fast enough speed, you can go at decent speed and frequency from Köln to Basel, Köln to Karlsruhe, Köln to Mannheim, of course, Köln to or Frankfurt or whatever, to these points south to Stuttgart, Stuttgart, Ulm, where they're building Augsburg, München. That line's gonna get overloaded pretty fast if the trains get good. So you want to, as much as possible, not load it with extra stuff, which means that you don't want to build your high speed line like this. You want to build your high speed line like this direct. Again, it's just an avoiding overloading thing where because okay, so if you do this, then you're slightly slowing through trips from Paris to Frankfurt and then to Berlin, because this should also be fast. I mean, actually, some of it is actually even being built, just not enough. This is being built, I think, a little bit of this. And so you're speeding up Paris to Mannheim if you do this diversion, but nothing else, because Mannheim is not on the way, right? Because from Paris to Frankfurt, you could just, we're discussing the alternative of going direct. From Paris to points east, what's the point of doing this when you can do this? So the main route from Paris to points east is actually via Karlsruhe, and then you could just do this, and it's always going to be faster than diverting through Mannheim. So Mannheim is not really on the way, and it's also not a large enough city to be served just by itself. So this is probably what they should be doing. And that's going to speed up Paris to Frankfurt. Now, Paris to Frankfurt is actually decently run in the sense that the ICE TGV trains don't compete very much. So they're not trying to do this constant mutual sniping that we see with the France to Spain market, where SNCF is sniping and preventing competition from working, but not even in the sense of doing a coordinated plan with the TAC the way they're doing between France and Germany. They just are sniping the competition. Yes, when I'm saying Mannheim, I am including Ludwigshafen. So I'm talking about the entire Rhein-Neckar region. Like the Rhein-Neckar is like what, 2.7 million? It's not nothing, but Frankfurt, Rhein-Main is like what, 5 million? And then and remember the fastest way from Paris to Berlin is by Frankfurt. So add another 5 million people there. Plus, the 8 people who live in Fulda. And the 3 who live in Erfurt and think they're important. And so when I moved here from Paris, I did so by train, but I could not do it in a single day. I mean, it was that, or I think my options were getting up very early in the morning, or having to trust a 15-minute connection, either Köln or Frankfurt. I know SNCF, I know that no, you do not trust a 15-minute connection when if you miss that connection, you're fucked. So what I did is I stayed the night in Köln. I like Köln. It's a very pretty city. I got FOMO about not moving there that day. Then I moved to Berlin and that FOMO evaporated. Um, and so the Germans just need to invest. And again, I'm highlighting a German thing because Germany is the worst offender on this. I mean, France is the worst offender in operations in the sense that it's constantly sniping competitors, but also while also not offering good service. So in Italy, for example, they have an enforced competition, but it actually helped the secondary routes because Trenitalia was not investing in them very well or not running service there very well. So Italo actually provided an important service that filled a gap, and it actually forced Trenitalia to be more competitive, and that was good. But in France, they're like Trenitalia, not doing well on serving secondary markets or international markets, but also they find ways to snipe the competition. I mean, what's the EC, what's the EU gonna tell them? No. Remember, everything that works through the courts will be abused by powerful actors. In America, the courts are never going to be able to tell a popular racist governor to stop being racist. And here, the courts can only block SNCF's shenanigans to some extent. Now, they can force competition to some extent, but if SNCF says, we've decided that there's a problem with your braking system, right, braking system. Yeah, this is why you Renfe do not get to be on our tracks, but we will still run trains to Barcelona. This is literally SNCF. And they're not doing the Swiss thing of blocking competition while actually doing a good job serving the various markets. But again, it's operational. When it comes to infrastructure, first of all, operationally, France and Germany do cooperate. And second, the big infrastructure gaps are mostly German. So it's this needs to be built. Yeah, not this to make Paris Frankfurt and then Paris Berlin faster. This and this is also in Belgium to fill in this gap, speed up this bit, build this, so that you can actually go fast between Paris and Köln, between Brussels and Köln, between Brussels and points east in Germany in general, Brussels and Frankfurt. In general, actually, by the way, something about network design also. The one benefit of Köln over Berlin has way less QAnon protests. We don't have that many QAnon protests. Remember Berlin, Leipzig. These are kind of like the islands. Like yeah. East Germany is full of shitheads, Saxony especially. But Leipzig, for example, is where all the queers run to escape the shitheads. Berlin, same thing. So it was actually in Leipzig when there was supposed to be a Quell protest. Um, uh, so so I was there, and while I was eating, there was the Antifa march, or people say something antifascista, and me and the person I was eating with were talking about how if we weren't eating, we would be joining them, and the Antifa protest was considerably bigger than the Quell protest because it's Leipzig, a city where the representatives of the Aststimme in the Bundestag are one Green and one Die Linke, and the Die Linke person is there only because of the strategic voting to give Die Linke the 3 seats. Uh, yeah. I mean, journalists do get. I mean, there are Nazis in like this part of the world in neighborhoods like Marzahn, just as in your part of the world, Hulu. There are also Nazis. They're just not in Köln, the city. They're in Gelsenkirchen. I mean, yeah, I know that like you beat us for the for the constituency with the lowest AfD proportion. This still pisses me off that Berlin Mitte did not win, but still. Um, but anyway, so the point is that why am I on the floor? So the point is that you want to build this to connect um Brussels to Point East, and actually a really cool thing that might be useful to think about. Let's look for a moment at Köln. And at the layout of the ground. So Köln has an east-west rather than north-south layout. So what this means is that if I'm going from Paris or from Brussels or wherever to points east, it's a through station, but most travel is north-south here. So it's pinch, plink. So either I change trains or the train reverses direction on a remarkably slow bridge, or some trains skip the station. They do this, I think. I don't remember. There are trains that only serve Deutz. Uh, so I think the trains go like this, but I also think it's like a lower level or something. So I don't think it's actually cross platform or anything like that. Huli, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is like I think the through is underground, right? Oh, Minster was first. Nice. Um, Zeta and Görlitz. Um. So anyway, the point is that you probably want to increase east-west traffic through Köln just to avoid the pinching. So if there's some way of using this line as like a line to the Netherlands, maybe, although I guess this is a better route because then you've also got from Dortmund, Essen, Duisburg, you can like that, go like this. And then connect to Utrecht and Amsterdam. But also, but you definitely want, but I mean, you definitely want to go to Aachen to like add trains to go to Aachen. You want to add trains that go to Brussels. Now Aachen is domestic, but Aachen is small. So Brussels is kind of the anchor, and then Paris. Actually, the fastest way, if all these lines are built, the fastest way from Paris to cities in most of northern Germany is going to be like this. It's going to be via Köln. So to the entire Rhine-Ruhr and also to Hanover and Hamburg. And then the middle route, so the one that appears to be under construction but isn't, uh, to Saarbrücken. So this is the route they should be building. This is for Frankfurt, Fulda, Erfurt, I guess also Leipzig and Dresden, and then Berlin. I mean, it wouldn't be direct Leipzig and Berlin. The trains probably do Paris, Saarbrücken, Mainz, Frankfurt, Fulda, Erfurt. Probably they would actually not stop at Halle. I don't think the trains would be stopping in Halle. And then express to Berlin from Erfurt. And then if you want to go to Leipzig, there should be a timed or timed-ish connection that does Erfurt to Leipzig, Pinch, Dresden. And then maybe it should make a stop here that you could then transfer to Halle. And then the southern part is already being built because you can go to Karlsruhe pretty quick. You can go to Basel without even doing this line because this is actually I think this line Strasbourg to Basel might actually be the fastest non high speed line in Germany. In Germany and France, I think the average speed here is something like 140, 150 kilometers an hour or something. So France to Switzerland is actually semi decent. Like it's Lyria. I mean, maybe you want to do something that lets the trains serve Jeanne a little bit better because this is very slow. But the problem is that Jeanne is not on the way to anything. So the problem is so Geneva is so the problem is that it's not. So what is it on the way to, right? I mean, like what is it on the way to? Also, it's not Jeanne. It's Geneva. Jeanne is a different city. Jeanne is Ghana. So in Geneva, the problem is that you you shouldn't speed up this very much just to go to do Paris Geneva because Geneva, I mean, it's a very self-important city because people who keep talking about human rights violations and then don't do anything about them live in Geneva. It's on the route. Oh yeah, from Lyon to Zurich. Lyon is again not exactly a giant metropolis, and that's a big problem actually. Now, so here's the thing: Paris to Zurich does not have any reason to go. Like the thing, Paris to German-speaking Switzerland would go through here. Maybe, I mean, maybe they try to do it here, but I think that if they can make this faster, they should go through here because this route is critically overcrowded and this route isn't. So they're going via Basel. So actually, they're kind of making Basel the main gateway to Switzerland because it already is from France, and then from Germany, they're upgrading this, but leaving this line. So where's city? So this is being very squiggly, you can kind of see. Instead of just building high-speed line here, they're overloading here. And it's also not even an overload because the trains are so slacky, they're not even overloaded. So they need to do this better, and then that gets you from France. But again, to some extent, it's already being done from France to the core to the Swiss core, which I'm sure the Romandie people will not forgive me for saying that this is the Swiss core and not this. But and this is already being built. So Lyon to Turin, it's very high cost because mountains. And they're like understandably expensive, but this is thankfully being built. So there is investment here. I think the trains could be faster than they are intending to make them, but that's getting you Paris to Torino at a very competitive trip time. It's going to be 3.5 hours maybe. Because Paris to Lyon, right? Because Paris to Lyon is two. This might even be 3 hours. I'm not sure. Maybe if they're going to be slowing this because of freight, then it's going to be 3.5. But 3.5 is pretty good. And then Milano, and then to Milano, I don't know, 4 something. I mean, still okay. And yeah, Paris Rome is gonna suck, but I mean, if flights are banned, high World War III rail, you can still do this, and then do a night in Milan. I mean, a night in Milan is not terrible from Paris to Rome. And then this needs to be better invested in. I mean, Switzerland is investing. It's just for some reason thinking that this is going to be 2 hours when basically all is going to be high speed rail. So it could be done in an hour. And then that's your transship, not just for freight, but also for passengers between Milano and, especially if they build this, from Milano to the rest of Transylvania Europe. It's just that, so here's the thing. I mean, so here's where the plans don't really match. Basel is the gateway from Switzerland to points north and northwest. But Basel does not connect with the base tunnels very well because the base tunnels go to Zurich, they go to Zurich, or this is for Bern. And so the upshot is that the so the upshot is that the system for connecting to Italy and the system for connecting to Germany, they're not planned in conjunction because people think, oh, it's too far. People are not going to do it because it's only too far right now because the trains are very slow. And if the trains were sped up and there were also a high-speed line from Zurich up to probably Stuttgart, then Stuttgart to Milano would be 2.5 hours or something. I mean, this could be done in that, and that's very good. And then 2.5 hours up to Stuttgart gets you 3.5 hours up to Frankfurt am Main. 3.5 hours from Frankfurt am Main to Milano, that is absolutely something that normative people who are very straight and use the expression ideological experiments to describe gay rights and think that Greeks are lazy would ride. It's a normative for people who lost the election. No, I think it's going to be next. I think Leon Torino is going to be next. The thing is, when you're doing a base tunnel, you're not saving that much money by making it not mixed. Because what you're saving by not making a line mixed is you can go steeper. And when you can go steeper, first of all, at first order, that lets you avoid some tunnels. And second, you can also have much higher super elevation, so that lets you tighten the curves, avoiding tunnels further. That is true in hilly terrain, okay? So Paris, Lyon, absolutely. Paris, Bordeaux, absolutely. If Berlin to Munich were like this, they could have done it better. If Stuttgart to München were like this, they could have done it better. Frankfurt to Köln has tunnels, sadly, but that's unavoidable. It's just a much worse terrain, but it did help that they went 4% passenger only on Frankfurt Köln. When you're doing a base tunnel, that's unhelpful. When you're doing a base tunnel, you're saving very small amounts of tunneling, and the tunneling, and at the level of a base tunnel, it's like tunnels stop scaling with a kilometer. So some things you might be able to notice from Open Railway Map So maybe it will show you. So it's showing you the old tunnel. The old tunnel is straight from Airolo to Goshen to Andermatt and Goshen. Because you want least amount of tunneling, you go straight. But you might notice that the base tunnel, the north one from Biaska through I shouldn't say Zadlon because they don't say in this verse of it's Zadlon to Altdorf is not perfectly straight, and the reason is that at that level of geology, you want to maybe reduce overburden or find better rock. So if they could make this a steeper tunnel, yes, they could have avoided a lot of the tunnels. I'm pretty sure that at 4%, they could have gone from Fido, maybe, and not from Biasca. But first of all, this is a really important freight line. This might actually be Europe's most important freight line. And second, you're not saving that much because it's still a giant ass mountain. And this is equally going to be true of Lyon Turin. I mean, yes, you're saving some tunnels if you're doing passenger only, but freight is also part of the point of this. And that's just fine. Uh, and so, uh, and so limiting, so 3.5% grades or something. Again, they help, but they don't. But it's not as stark as with Paris Lyon, which is zero tunnel. I think Paris Bordeaux might also be zero tunnel, or if it's on, it's very close. You are not getting that here. Forget about it. I mean, I don't know what exactly they're going to do. I mean, maybe they want to split the difference into the tunnel and the approaches mixed, but then Lyon to Chambéry should probably be passenger only, maybe. But this understanding is going to be a base tunnel, and that's good. Like if it's not, no. How do I keep forgetting what do I click to ban these people? Ban and ban. Two things got you banned. You're being a spammer and being a Nazi. Anything else that I need to? Yep, this as well. I do not get why accounts that were created in July are spamming me now. Yep, this as well. So this, yeah. So the tunnels are. I mean, the tunnels are not very slow. The tunnels are. I think for passenger trains. So the Euro tunnel is 160 kilometer an hour special. I think the passenger trains actually managed to squeeze 250 out of the Swiss-based tunnels. Um, they're. I mean, they're not Chinese high-speed rail type fast, but they're pretty fast. Um, so anyway, the point is that it's again so for freight they're investing. I mean, they're also let's not forget the space tunnel banner. It's actually being built. They're building some of the approaches, not all. They need to complete Munich to they need to complete München to Innsbruck to and this is going to involve more tunneling because mountains here. To do München because so this is the Zürich connection, which is again very bad for points north. And yeah, you can maybe connect. I think it's called. I think the connection point is called Art Goldau from point south to Bern, but that's still kind of a slog for international scale. And actually, it's likely that the main passenger connection is going to be via this tunnel, via Ghana. It's just they need to invest a lot in this, which to some extent they are into this. I think this is just not being done in split dimension. So they need to rip to Verona, and then from Verona, I think this is already being planned. At least 250. So this is the point of hyper. Like I mean, they just not are not doing this very well, for the most part. Or let's not forget, which is, Or let's not forget Prague. Because they're also not doing Berlin to Dresden to Prague very well. They're trying to do it as a base tunnel. So remember how I mentioned before that it's okay that they're doing Lyon to Torino as a base tunnel? This is wrong. So there are plans to do this as a base tunnel. This is a terrible plan because this is going to be a 40-kilometer tunnel, I believe, is planned. What they should be doing is 4% grades. There's already and the point is that there's already an existing line here that's pretty good. So the point is it should be done Chinese style. So freight goes on the old line, passenger trains in the new line. The drawback of the Chinese style is that it means that the old line can't carry very good passenger trains. But what exactly do you think you're going to do with passenger rail on the old line? I mean, there's regional trains out of Dresden, but none of these is a very important destination. And nothing here, and it's called Saxon, Switzerland. So that's not a very important destination. So you can run slow, and that's fine. There's regional commuter stuff, but that is more urban really and suburban, so it's more here. Um, I guess it's Usti. But first of all, Usti can get. I mean, if you really want, you can give Usti a high-speed rail stop. Second, hey, we have a non-TSU minister at BMV. I mean, FDP, but aka TSU without Gond. But I mean, close enough. And the second thing is, I mean, and the second thing is that, okay, so there's Usti. Pony, so Pony follows World War III very closely, and whenever I talk about, let's say, the devastation in a certain outlying Czech city like Ostrava or Olomouc or something, he says that, well, it's Ostrava or it's Olomouc, there's nothing there anyway. Going through Cheb and Hof. With they're building a base tunnel with 1.8. Oh, with the Brenner approaches. I don't. I don't think the Brenner approaches are anywhere on the agenda, like anywhere on the existing plans. Anywhere on the existing plans between to build again. And there are things that they're building right now, or they're not building with shovels in the ground or tractors or bulldozers in the ground, but things that are actively being planned and are going to get funded in the budget, because the whole point is that there's a coalition agreement with a budget, and the budget includes, oh, we will spend X amount of money on these lines that we've just gotten the cost estimates for. So this is stuff like Frankfurt to Mannheim, or stuff like Hannover so stuff like Hannover to Bielefeld, and then Bielefeld to Hamm. I have no idea why it's colored red. It's actually a fast line. I'm forgetting whether that includes Hannover to Hamburg. Finally, this is already being built. It's not even in the coalition agreement, because that's like saying that the coalition agreement says that Germany will continue not being Nazi. Like, I mean, Germany is not a Nazi state. Germany is also currently building the fort ranking here on this line. And again, a couple more things, like Frankfurt so almost Frankfurt to Hanau to Fulda. I'm forgetting. I don't think they're doing all the way from Fulda to Erfurt. I think they're doing only up to Eisenbach, maybe. So again, there are a bunch of investment plans that have been okayed in the coalition agreement, but essentially they said no more, because they don't want to buy new trains for them for some stupid reason. And so my understanding is that the coalition said that if it's not on the plan, it's not going to happen, and this means, unfortunately, no fast trains from München to Innsbruck, as I understand it. Yeah. The Bavarian NIMBY. I mean, yeah, Vissing doesn't care what people in Bavaria who are 5 minutes from voting AfD think, but also Vissing has not signed his name to a coalition. It had signed, but Vissing signed his name to a coalition agreement in which this is not going to happen for now. It's not just Vissing. Özdemir, Habeck, Baerbock, Scholz signed their name to a coalition agreement in which this, as I understanding, is not happening. It might happen in the future. I mean, if people are, I mean, travel's going to recover when we get to like the two-letter variant, when we run out of Greek letters and say things like the Delta Nu variant or something, and when people just finally get um, vaccinated against all of them, and travel goes back to 2019 levels and much more because Europe connections between Europe are deepening. Then there might be demand, but they should be planning now and not. Oh my God, it's 2030. There's all this travel, and the trains are really slow, and people are driving and flying, and our airports are very congested. What could we do about it before 2050? Oh my God. It's going to be a lot more than just Alpha Beta. I mean, Alpha Beta is going to, so there are 24 Greek letters, they're skipping some. So Omega is the 24th, Alpha Alpha is 25th, and then Alpha Beta is 26th. We're already in Omicron. Um, yeah, the NIMBYs are going to want a random extra tunnel for things, but I mean, to give full credit, the terrain here not the same as the terrain um, over here. So the fact, are they saying why is HH Hannover and not Hamburg? What next? The Coca-Cola City NYC, and that's going to be Philadelphia. Anyway, this, yes, there's a few hills there. This should be zero tunnel. This, I think, is also actually going to be zero tunnel, not just should be. But this, they're actually planning on extensive tunneling here. I think maybe 20% for ungodly reason. Uh, so Stuttgart to Ulm might need some tunnels, but not as many as they want. And this, I think, might be doable zero tunnel if they twin with the Autobahn. I think this should also not just be this, but Fripp direct. This is a thing that they could do with very little tunneling. I'm forgetting whether it's on the plan or not. To complete mention to Ingolstadt. But 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 uh, but this is just way too. In the same way that mountains tunnels are unavoidable in Switzerland. So everyone says electronics before concrete. Let's be like Switzerland, not build high-speed rail tunnels. No, Switzerland builds more tunnels than you do. Um, Merkel got to Omicron. Fuck. Okay, okay. Right. So that's the first letter. Got it. Right, got it. Yeah, that's silly, but that makes more sense. And then they're doing, and are they trying to do something like AA? What is it? AA Frankfurt? Oh, they do AH. Okay, yeah, I was gonna say that maybe they're doing AA to avoid the to avoid the header to avoid the abbreviation AH. Um, but okay. Um, we do know what Bjorn Höcke's favorite rail station is going to be. Actually, that's a joke. That's just for symbolic reason. Bjorn Höcke's favorite rail station is, of course, in Poland. Um, very cosmopolitan this way. His favorite rail station is near Katowice here, right here in Noświecin. There's even a spur. Okay, yeah. That Scholz is. I don't think Scholz is a variant of Merkel, to be honest. I don't know what he was doing in the Greek crisis, but Steinmeier. Remember that Steinmeier was actually meeting with members of Syriza. Um, and it's the same thing with everyone says, "Oh, Macron is neoliberal," and Jens Varoufakis had to remind people that yes, Macron is very neoliberal. Macron also backed moderation and leniency toward Greece in the Eurogroup. Um, like the thing is that the center left people don't yell "fuck austerity," "fuck capitalism," "fuck everything," "fuck the EU." Unlike Die Linke. However, they keep saying, okay, it's okay to maybe raise the deficit by 1% of GDP. I mean, he's pressured, but that's not the thing. I mean, Like, I don't think that he's personality-wise a lot like Merkel at all. Um, and but anyway, so the so anyway, that's the point about the international high-speed rail that needs to be built. Again, it's mostly a German thing, but also there are things that do not involve Germany, like France, Spain. They're underinvesting essentially because SNCF hates the world, so they're not, let's say, making this fast. This, of course, is what they should be investing in as the main Paris to Madrid route because this might be useful for Paris to Barcelona, but Paris to Madrid, first of all, this is a little slower, and second, more importantly, this overloads Paris to Lyon. Like, one of the things you always want, I mean, when you have a choice between two routes, go with the route that's not going to overload things that are already overloaded or that might be soon, like Paris to Lyon, Frankfurt to Mannheim. I mean, if the trains ran better, then Frankfurt to Köln would be critically overloaded because it's the connection between between the entirety of the Netherlands and the Upper Rhine. Um, People don't think of this as a megacity because they say things like blue banana. I think this was an invention of someone who said that this is a megacity. So hopping the Alps and somehow curving in a way to avoid Paris because it was entirely a criticism of how the French economy was too Paris centric. Um, but in reality, the actual very tight connections between, for example, the pharmaceutical firms, I believe they to some extent go up to Brussels, go down up to Brussels and the Netherlands. It's mostly maybe to some extent Netherlands, but certainly a German thing. Going up from about here up. Unfortunately, I think only on the German side. I don't think it's very strongly connected to Strasbourg. Up to about Basel. That's kind of like where so it's like my understanding is that the main biotech centers of the world are this megacity. Again, maybe it's going to maybe it's going up to here and here. I'm not sure. Not up. Again, down to here and here. So from here down to about here. Um, for example, Mainz is where BioNTech is, and so that's number one, and then number two center. Why is this so jank? Number two center is this. So actually, Boston is a huge center. Going back to the 128 days. It was eclipsed by software tech down in San Francisco in Silicon Valley, but now it's coming back, and it's actually quite a lot of it is urban. Pfizer is headquartered in New York City, near Grand Central, but I think most of their labs are in Central Jersey. Philly, I think Janssen is in Philly. So Johnson and Johnson is the developer, and I'm forgetting where they're located. I think somewhere in Ohio, maybe. No, that's Procter and Gamble. I'm forgetting where Johnson and Johnson. Let me check actually, but I think that Janssen is a Philly company. Um, so kind of these are the two. Julio, are you complaining about derailing? Are you complaining that you're derailing me? I mean, oh, Johnson. Okay, JJ is in Central Jersey. Okay. And then and then the things that actually make pharmaceuticals. Oh, Janssen is in. Wait, Janssen is in Belgium for some reason. Why did you think that Janssen was in Philadelphia? Where did they develop? Okay, okay. So this is in Leiden. Okay. Why did they think this was in Philadelphia? Um. Anyway. Huh. I mean, this only goes into Central Jersey, but for some reason I thought it would go up to Philadelphia for some reason. Huh. Um. So biotech. I mean, maybe it doesn't go up to here, but only up to here. But again, very East Coast. There's some in the Bay Area, San Diego also. Um. But over here, in my part of the world again, I guess that has to include. I mean, if it's in Leiden, then it has to be like all the way down from Holland, like from Holland up the Rhine to your part of the world, really, and then I don't know what to call this. I want to say Rhein-Main, but yeah, Mainz is definitely Rhein-Main. It's literally where Main hits the Rhine. Up to Rhein-Main, up to Rhein-Neckar, up to Basel. Anyway, so again, I said that I might get to North America. Just with North America, just be very brief. With high-speed rail, it's all crayon, right? Because the United States is not actually building high-speed rail. The United States keeps saying they're going to invest a lot of money in high-speed rail, but that's essentially just a wish list of regional projects that are very poorly connected in the same way that over here, as I just explained, we have this problem where in Switzerland, and it's not, again, it's not Switzerland's fault or anything, it's Germany and Italy not talking to each other, or Germany and Switzerland not talking to each other, where the plan on the German side is that the main gateway to Switzerland goes through Basel, but because of the locations of the freight tunnels, the main gateway from the south is actually Zurich. So Zurich to Basel is an hour, which is fine for the Swiss. It's an hour for, I think, an hour, not for an hour. It's an hour for, I think, 110 or 120 kilometers, which is fine for upgraded trains. Especially because it's so based on connections and going from an hour to 40 minutes. That just saves 20 minutes. That's not a big deal. Or rather, it's not a big deal for the cost it would take to drill all the tunnels. And then they're not really investing in things or in either Germany or Switzerland and going from city to points north. And of course, from Basel to points south. I mean, Basel is at the northern end of Switzerland, so you need to go through all of like the core of Switzerland to even get to the tunnels going south. So the US is kind of like that, except obviously Switzerland's doing a lot of amazing things, just maybe not the greatest coordination with both Germany and Italy, for which, again, I mostly blame Germany and Italy. In the United States, all those jank things that I'm complaining about, it's essentially everything they do is the jank. And yeah, this doesn't matter very much. So Ventimiglia is the border between France and Italy, and SNCF, I think. So SNCF might even treat it as a French station to the point that that is a normal point in like the end of the eastern curve for Provence. It's just and they're still bypassing it with Lyon Torino, and they're specifically planning the high-speed trains to go to Nice and not caring very much about Ventimiglia, which they shouldn't. Ventimiglia is small. But I think it's just the availability of the Upper Rhine. It's because the railway up the Upper Rhine is already kind of upgraded, whereas the problem is that you can't accrete. So it's a lot of it is governed by accretion. So you can accrete things and make a decent line on the Upper Rhine, because in general you can do that with very dense mega regions, like the Northeast Corridor, which created a very expensive but decently usable intercity railway. But if you can't do this by accretion because you have Mannheim, Karlsruhe, Freiburg, and then Basel on the relatively in actually pretty flat terrain, like between Stuttgart and Zurich, you are not going to accrete anything. You have to just consciously build it as high-speed rail in the same way that there was never any direct track between Nuremberg and Ingolstadt, right? This is so before the MBS was built. This is how people went from München to Nuremberg. It was like this, and then they realized that this is fast. That there was already a sort of okay line from München to Ingolstadt, and then they could just build this as a shorter and more direct high-speed line. So they would actually have to consciously say, okay, fuck this shit, we're just gonna do a high-speed line that's maybe, I'm guessing this needs to be 30% in tall. Zurich to Stuttgart. Like, this is not very good terrain. It's nothing as spectacular as the Alps, and higher grades will help, but I'm guessing you're not doing this in less than 30% grades. So you go via Winterthur. There's a tunnel from Zurich to Winterthur that's already on the plan for, I think, Bahn 2035 for more capacity, because there's just too many trains between Zurich and Winterthur already. So piggyback on the bypass tunnel, and then go like this. It's just a matter of accretion. And so in the Northeast Corridor, they're doing the accretion, but they're doing it so poorly that the money just gets wasted unless you actually knock heads together or remove the heads because these people are just not very good at what they do and should be replaced. Should be replaced. Connecticut DOT people and so on. So all of this is speculation, but the speculation in the US generally includes Canada. Not Mexico, never Mexico. I've never seen. I mean, even Yona, for example, when he was crayoning this in I think 2009, he was crayoning things, including Toronto and Montreal, in Vancouver. But he specifically said, "Well, maybe, but the border situation is India. Mexico is not great, so let's not do it." So stuff like San Diego to Tijuana is never listed. El Paso is never listed together with Juarez, but I don't think that even adding Juarez makes any line to El Paso, Pensacola, just too far from everything else. Like, I don't think that even if you add Juarez and pretend that the US will allow good border controls without having its own agents brandish guns on Mexican territory, a lot of it is so the UK is very unreasonable about these things. The US is even worse. For example, they will not let you, the Americans do not do inspections of moving vehicles, they make the train set. They're not going to say, okay, we can figure out a stretch that's half an hour without stops and we'll check everyone at half hour. In this half hour, no, they make the train sit for an arbitrary amount of time until they're done processing everyone. And if you do pre-clearance, then CBP demands the right to carry guns and do local arrests if they find you an illegal immigrant as opposed to just denied entry. There's this entire system of immigration, and much of it is pan first world, but the US and UK insist on being closed even to the rest of the first world. Where so things like you have to buy a flight ticket with a return ticket, and only after you've bought the flight ticket are you allowed to request a special tourist visa if you don't qualify for a waiver. And the visa may be denied, and even if the visa is approved, it is constantly made clear to you that the border control official's decision at the border, even if you have a visa, is final and maybe negative if they don't like you. It's a system that it's a system that very much makes it clear that the government hates you because you're a foreigner. And it's going to be worse with Mexico. Mexico does not have preclearance because, again, CBP wants to brandish guns on Mexican territory. Mexicans understand where the guns in Mexico come from. They are not local to Mexico. They're squeamish. The United States thinks that people brandishing AR-15 guns and AR-15 style guns at protesters is good. So let alone their agents should rely on like Mexican police. So, but even then, nobody is granting this. Like San Diego to Tijuana, even though that actually adds a decent amount to the line to LA. This is more speculative, doing something like the Texas Triangle down to Coahuila and to Nuevo León, but just because not Coahuila, not Coahuila, Nuevo León, because the idea is to, I mean, yeah, I mean the stuff directly on the border is not very interesting. Was this Laredo? Yeah, Laredo. So Laredo is not very interesting. The Texas side, the Texas, also Texas. Neither the Texas nor the Mexico side of the Rio Grande Valley is that, or I guess maybe this, but I mean, I can see I mean, if they can build this at legacy rail speed, then sure, but they can't. And they don't, at legacy rail cost. I mean, I don't say they can't and that America sucks. America sucks, but I'm specifically complaining that this would, for example, have trouble going through city centers just because of the poor connections. Um, but anyway, the point is going through Laredo is not very interesting. But if you can get up to Monterrey, then that's actually decently interesting. It's gonna be a pretty long trip, Monterrey to even San Antonio. It is. So this is about 2 hours, maybe a little less if the line's very fast, and then up to Dallas, it's maybe 4-ish hours. Houston's probably going to be the same because you're not going to do flip. You're going to do flip. You're going to do flip because the direct line is Houston Dallas. So yeah, 4 hours to Houston or Dallas from Monterrey, and that's fine. It's just um that requires thinking better about the border, which kind of we have in Europe. It's just that the connections lag. The connections pretend it's still 1956, and for and even the business ever between France and Germany is very unusual. Um, Now Canada again is basically always included in the crayon. It's the same language. I mean, except for Montreal. Toronto is so big that it doesn't matter what kind of international malice you assign. New York Toronto is still good. Chicago Toronto is still good. It's just it's not really being planned in conjunction because again, all of this is crayon. People are not seriously planning high speed rail here, for example. Like this route is actually it's not amazing, but it's definitely the strongest it's outside the Northeast or California. Um, but again, that's not a creating. There's not enough density here to just make this a piecemeal thing. It has to be a conscious decision to build this high speed rail the entire way, Chicago to Detroit and Cleveland, and Toledo if you really care, what you should. Um, so yeah, okay, there was the customs zone in Baricha Bahnhof, but I mean, there's pre-clearance to the United States from the Vancouver train station. They're still not really investing in making the trains there better. There are some vague plans for high speed rail that mostly cost like high speed, like that either cost like high speed rail to deliver upgraded like intercity style speed or cost like maglev to deliver something approaching high speed rail. Like they're just really bad at doing that. Planning in the Pacific Northwest is unusually hilly and the city's not actually very big. Um, but anyway, so it's just there. So again, so the Americans are not doing this very well. I mean, not that in Europe it's being done very well. In Europe, the systems again. Look at the map that I showed before. Uh, France, fuck you. Spain. The Spain thing even goes into France to Perpignan. It's just France, Spain. Fuck you, France. If you're wondering, by the way, why there are two colors, so this line opened, I believe, 1989. So this was the second line to be built to open after Paris to Lyon. So meanwhile, they actually invested in making this an upgraded line to make Paris Bordeaux fast, and then they almost 30 years later, I think 2017, opened this line. I think I think Paris Bordeaux used to be 4 hours and now it's two. Or it was 3 point something and now it's two. Um, at any rate, so they go really fast up to Bordeaux and now they're very lazily planning to go to Dax or a little bit around here with, I mean, they think maybe to colonize Spain a little bit, but it's not designed as, okay, we will do what it takes to do Paris. If this is 2 hours, then this will be fine. They're not thinking that way because their airline sucks. They don't think anyone cares for a 5 minute rail trip, even though people constantly take trains at that distance. Um, so anyway, don't need to show that. He's cool, but he doesn't need to be a top. This, this, this can go. So like again in Italy, it's not fuck you or so much as mountains. This is being built. This isn't, unfortunately. Trains to Austria are also kind of lagging, and then because of that, trains in Austria are also not terribly quick, which is fine for Austria, which is not a very big country. But there's no attempt to, let's say, do a plan to do a combined plan of Germany and Austria to uh, make this squiggle actually a fast line that does mention Salzburg, Linz, Wien, Bratislava. Uh, Again, the plans to Prague are kind of bad. They're starting to maybe invest a little bit in Poland, but only a little bit, and most of that is medium speed, not high speed. And so Poland absolutely should be doing something like Gdansk to Warszawa to. So it's actually a big problem because the geography of Poland is kind of jank where Warszawa is a little bit too far west, too far east, rather than in the center. So you can do something like Warszawa to Łódź, and then to Katowice, and then to Krakow. Um, but then you don't want to make and then but you don't want to delay passengers from Gdansk to do this, right? So you might want to do something weird like Warszawa to Poznań via Łódź, and then Gdansk. You might even drag it via Łódź to go to Katowice and Krakow, and then I don't know, and then I think Pony, the trains, yeah, they can connect everything in Łódź. Um, yeah, I mean, you can do. It's not going to be a huge time penalty if you go via Łódź. It's just that, it's specifically you don't want to do plink, plink, plink. I mean, it'll maybe a little bit, which is fine. I mean, the central connection doesn't have to be the capital; it's allowed to stay. I mean, you know the bit. So you guys know the busiest train station in the Netherlands is not Amsterdam; it's Utrecht, because Amsterdam is too far here, and Utrecht is more central. Utrecht is kind of the reverse branch point for some things to Rotterdam and Amsterdam. Um, and I'm forgetting what the busiest is in Germany, because there are different numbers. Because some people also will count the people who just visit the train station to buy groceries, the way I go to Ostbahnhof for Sunday groceries. So yeah, you can. I mean, the center can be wood. It's just none of this exists. So they can do frip, 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 frip. Figure out something about Szczecin. Figuring something about Wrocław, which I guess this like uh, tank. Yeah, Poland's just really bad geography for high speed. Um, and then do something about I don't know Praga, Brno, Strava, Katowice, and then Brno to Wien and Bratislava somehow. Then Budapest. Then I mean you can keep going east, right? I mean you can do Wien, Bratislava, Budapest. But if the train runs nonstop, then two men might actually be able to safely hold hands on the train as it jumps between Wien, Bratislava, and Budapest. Because right now on the trains in Hungary and Poland, two men or two women cannot safely hold hands. Beyond that, the density just drops. I mean, it would be nice to have like a Europe, like a like a Euro NATO that goes up to its natural boundary, which is this, uh, and then a railway network that goes all the way up to all the way up the Baltics, and then to Minsk, and then to and beyond, and then to Kiev. And maybe you wanted to do something that gets you like good Kiev Minsk and not whatever this is. Um, it's just that the population density here is way too low. And so yeah, we can like draw a ticket to ride and then do let's do an Ostbahn doing Berlin, Poznan, Warszawa, Brest, Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, and then Donetsk. Um, but that's there's the density in Ukraine is not there, and it's I doubt going to be there. Yeah, I mean, there's no mountains, so Eastern Europe is going to be able to build high-speed rail cheaper. But I mean, remember, France does not have tunnels on most of the high-speed rail lines, and the costs in France. I mean, they're not free or anything. I mean, they're not expensive, but that's still, I mean, 20 million euros a kilometer. And remember, Ukraine is poor. Ukraine cannot spend 20 million euros a kilometer on a high-speed line. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, there are weird plans for transport in Poland. I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm not gonna say that there are the plans in Hungary, right? Because when I think about the Hungarian government's transport plans, given who Orban's idols are, again, pretty sure that like the favorite train for Orban certainly is like the one for Höcke. So again, a little Polish town of Szczecin. Uh, Peace is not like that. Peace's favorite train station is whining that all the communists were Jews and all the Jews were communists and that they sold out Armia Krajova and And let's not talk about why 300,000 Jewish Holocaust survivors in Poland very rapidly were not in Poland. Um, yeah, Ukraine could very easily do this, and yeah, so the fact that Ukraine is 15 is 1.52 is not a big deal because Spain has to deal with that problem. So Spain has gauge change trains. Eastern Europe has this weird shit where they do bogie exchange. So you cross the border between, let's say, I want to say Russia and China or Russia and North Korea. I'm forgetting whether it's done between Russia and Mongolia or Mongolia and China at this point. But what they do is you get off the. I think they make you get off the train for this. They take the car body, they lift it, they exchange the bogie from standard gauge to Russian gauge or the other way around, depending on the direction of travel. And the process takes maybe only a couple of minutes per car. They're long. These are transcontinental trains that are very long. So the actual bogie exchange takes hours. Oh, their gauge change. They have gauge change trains. Yeah, that's nice because I know they have that in Spain, and that is something that just me. So a modern gauge change train, especially when you do locomotives suck for this, by the way, because is the way I understand the Spanish system is that locomotives are fixed gauge, so you need to exchange a locomotive, and that's a chore. But on an EMU, the way it works is you flip a switch that makes the gauge, it makes the train go variable gauge. You need to go very slow, or else the train's going to derail. I believe the rated speed for this is 5 kilometers an hour. Um, so that is, I don't know, a meter point something per second, which means that if it's a standard 8 car, 200-meter train, you clear the entire thing in 2 minutes. And, no, not 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes. And then if it is a long train, so 400 meters, you clear the thing in about 5 minutes. And then you lock the gauge then you lock the wheels to the new gauge, and then you keep going on your merry way toward Ukraine or Poland. Yeah, they do the lifting thing where I do not get why. Seriously, I do not get why they do it. It takes hours, even on the multi-year track, like in the Book of Numbers in the Bible, where it took them 40 years to cross Sinai, which can be walked in a matter of days today, or could be done. Also, so it's like 40 years to get between Moscow and Vladivostok, or between Moscow and Beijing. Um, yeah, it doesn't matter that it's a freight-oriented plane. Like, I mean, you can put the gauge change, you could put the gauge change thingies on a freight as well. Like, I mean, so the whole thing is that a gauge changer. Again, maybe that's the EMU system, but for a very long train, you could just put a locomotive, and that's just an extra, and that's just a fixed amount of time. So for a 25-meter car, uh, let's call it a high-speed rail car or a car that has two 40-footers, um, like the two 40-foot, what's it called, containers. Um, that takes with the gauge change system at 5 kilometers an hour. That's about 16 or 17 seconds per car, and the bogie exchange is a couple of minutes. So the longer the train is, the more time you're losing to using the bogie exchange rather than the gauge change train. And if anything, again, if it's a long freight train, the fact that you could just stick the locomotive at the end, that takes a while, but it's a while that's a fixed amount of time. So if your train has, 50 cars or something, then okay, whatever. I mean, that's okay. Okay, after you've spent, an hour, well, not an hour, right? Because we said 15-ish or 16 seconds, so 50 minutes. So let's say 50 cars. So after you've spent, I don't know, 12 minutes, yeah, you can spend a couple more minutes on the loco. Oh, okay, okay. Um, Yeah, so if the crossing is overloaded with freight, then what you should be doing is I mean, I guess they don't have enough passenger trains that it's going to help to just eat them to a high speed line because um, in China, what they're doing is the high speed lines just eat the system, they just eat the passenger trains to the high speed lines. But this is in the context of even before high speed rail, China had a lot of trains, right? A lot of passenger trains, especially just before and just after Chinese New Year. Um, to the point that I can even see a world in which the line to Irimchi had an actual transport benefit as opposed to just being colonization bullshit, like the Western lines in the United States that they often built them specifically so that they could shoot at the bison so that the Native Americans would starve. And so but yeah, Russia to China might just not have, might just be a couple passenger trains a day, so maybe that's not going to help. And I imagine the same is with Poland, with Poland, Belarus. I mean, how many people? I mean, at this point, people are just not crossing the border very much between Poland and Belarus. Period. Right? I mean, because I know. I mean, obviously the refugees aren't, but like how many Belarusian dissidents are actually capable of? This is actually me being curious about the extent of exit controls right now. To what extent, for example, a Belarusian dissident who has been marked as someone who hates Lukashenko can just waltz across the border to Ukraine or to Poland. Um, oh, okay, okay, okay. Oh, interesting. Interesting that they escaped via Russia. I would expect. Huh. Okay. Huh. Yeah. No. No. Yeah. Yeah. The China to Europe freight traffic goes through Russia. We'll see how much of that lasts after Germany informs China that it should, from time to time, use free rather than slave labor. Oh, Russia's visa free, right? Because the Belarusians are not getting any visas to Poland, a country that keeps speaking about its commitments to NATO and the Lublin group or whatever. It's not Lublin, right? It's Lublin. Lublin. Yeah. So besides the fact that Poland needs a better government pronto, okay, you're right. It's Lublin. It's not it's neither Lublin nor Lublin. Okay. Um, yeah, there are all these night trains that are very at least the train that I saw in Nice, because there's a train from Nice to from Nice to Moskva, which I think it's over 2 nights. Uh, uh, and it looked like a very luxury train, the RZD train from Nice to Moskva. Yeah, imagine no, I'm not saying Lublin in the sense of the city of Lublin. I'm saying there's this Lublin agreement between it's not Lublin, it's both Lublin agreement between Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine. Something something international cooperation. Something something. We hope that France and Germany don't sell us out to Putin. Um, but yeah, that like Eastern Europe is just a weird thing, and I don't mean a weird thing that Eastern Europe is culturally. I just mean seriously the population. Let me find a population the map of Europe. And also what happened to my space bar? Okay, this might be what I'm interested in. Or this. This is not very good. This is oh maybe this. I compared to Central Europe. You might be able to see already here the gradient though. Oh right, yeah, Google Earth, not Google, the Google Image Search is a little junk. This is not great actually because it kind of misses what's going on in France and Spain. Although maybe I don't know. I mean, so let me look at a vivid map. Okay. Okay, so this is at this looks like subnational something other something level, and then Britain it's a little more granular. Um, yeah, this is not good enough. I mean, you could kind of say that Eastern Europe is less dense than Western Europe, but um, okay, this might be a little bit better. That was a teeth. It's a large image, and yeah, now I'm going to send it to Pinterest. This was I was told this was big. Anyway, so here's the thing, and it's I guess just EU, so you don't see Ukraine here. So the density you can kind of see the I don't know what to call it, low country slash lower Rhine, and then there's a little bit of a gap, but it's not big enough to impede this being a mega region. Like down the Rhine here, and then it goes up to Basel, which is not included because not EU and never has been EU. Um, Britain's very like England's very dense. Sorry, Border's very insistent on. I know you're very insistent. England is very dense. Uh, yeah, Eastern Europe. It's not just the issue with Eastern Europe is not just colonialism. Eastern Europe. So the colonialism that depopulated Eastern Europe was in the 14th century, 13th and 14th century with the Mongols. Um, and yeah, and it's not just its villages. Like I mean, the area was completely depopulated in the early modern era. There's actually so someone who uses with on Twitter named Andrea Matanga talks about the history of Russia in this context, where the way this works is that you had the Crimean Tatars here in well Crimea, and they would launch and because it's and because this is, I think, a 9 kilometer land border, they could very easily defend it. So they're mounted archers, so they have very fast strategic mobility. So they just would go up, snatch people, go back down, sell them to slavery in the Ottoman Empire. Um, or not just the Ottoman Empire. In the early modern era, it would have been Ottoman Empire. Before that, it would be whatever, either to the Turks or to the Byzantines. And so kind of the loci that became like the main Eastern European empires had to develop very far away from them. So Poland and Moskva. And so what they did is they very slowly defended their nearest borders, I think on the Oka, so around here, and then they very slowly expanded forts in this direction. The problem being that the flow goes south to north, right? So if I'm a Crimean Tatar raider, I can start my campaign when the ground thaws around here, when the snow melts around here, and then by the time I get to I don't know Belgorod or wherever to kidnap Russian civilians as slaves, maybe at the time I start, there's still snow on the ground in Belgorod, but by the time I get there, it's already melted. So that means it's much easier for me as a Tatar, a raider to campaign than for Russia to campaign than for let's say a Russian Cossack to campaign against. So this is why Ukraine was essentially the Wild West of the or the Wild East or whatever of the 17th century. So by the 17th century, it doesn't go all the way up to the Oka. The raiding goes only as far as roughly Ukraine. And then you have Poland and Russia trying to slowly conquer this. And actually, one of the biggest pogroms of the era, the Khmelnytsky uprising, was essentially a guy named Khmelnytsky who told the Ukrainian peasants, "Wait a sec, we all hate the Poles, right? They're our overlord. We all hate the Jews, right? They killed Christ. So how about we make a deal with the Tatars in which we let the Tatars raid into this land as long as they only kill or kidnap Poles and Jews but leave us alone. Because if we're all united, then the Tatars will not be able to raid. But then if we're all united, then the Jews will be able to be Jewish next to us and EU Jews." This is essentially the Khmelnytsky uprising. it's considered like a national liberation in Ukraine, in Poland, and in the Jewish world. It's considered a horrific pogrom that, especially against the Jews, because everyone could agree to hate the Jews together, led to horrific massacres. But eventually the gunpowder and the settled empires won, and then by forgetting when, early 18th century, Russia gets close enough that you can just raid directly into Crimea and then conquer the Tatars. Um, the Mongols are an excuse, yes, but the Tatars specifically are, but the Tatars specifically were the people doing that. And yes, the Rus was the Rus was not anything like early modern Russia, but it was but it had a big capital, like a big imperial capital in Kiev. And so it was not so the so yes there were so it was trade plus trade, right? I mean, so were the Vikings, for example, where it's the kind of very high density, but for example but for example they were no longer nomadic. They were no longer they were, as I understand it, settled agriculturalists who also engaged in like low density raiding, as opposed to full nomad Central Asian Central Asian pastoralists, or actually the Plains Indians, same thing. And so so at any rate, the point is that Ukraine just does not have a high population density. Neither does Belarus, neither does European Russia. And to the point that a lot of theories, like why was there serfdom there when it was being abolished farther west, kind of agree. Like the kind of starting point is this is a much less densely settled area than this, for example. Um, Again, we don't see Ukraine in this map, unfortunately. We do see this zone and then Alps and the Italian zone. France is a little weird, and so is Spain, because Spain, especially, the way this works is where is it? Okay, it's still in Ukraine, but okay, whatever. Uh, what? This is smaller than the map. I think this is smaller than the map is when you. Yeah. Okay. At any rate, um, so you might notice that the contiguous density in Spain is kind of coastal. Or here. So it's a bunch of coastal cities, like Barcelona, like Valencia. I mean, okay, inland you have Zaragoza, Alicante. Okay, Granada is not coastal; it's near the coast. Sevilla, Cadiz. And then yeah, you had some inland things for Castilla. So I think the historic big cities of Castilla are Toledo and Valladolid. But they built the capital in Madrid. I mean, that's not terribly important. I mean, if the capital had been in Toledo, yeah, it would have been easier to get it, to serve it, because Madrid is not very good with the river transportation system. But everything else would have been the same. So the point is that you have a big capital, and then everything else is awkwardly placed in all directions around it because it follows the water. And essentially, the only reason the intercity trains work at all in Spain, especially with how poorly run they are, is that the construction costs are so insanely low that they can run a train between Madrid and Sevilla and make a profit on it, despite Sevilla not being a very large city, and despite the only thing between Madrid and Sevilla is Córdoba, which this side of the 12th century or 13th century is not that much of a big city. Um, So yeah, okay, you can also so no, I mean you can't put all the cities online. I mean, yeah, you're going up to Cordova and then Sevilla, and then maybe Cadiz, and then okay, so to Huelva, different thing. Then a branch to Granada, then a branch to Malaga, then Almeria and Marbella are completely different. And likewise here, okay, you're doing something to maybe Alicante, but then you're only serving Alicante and maybe Murcia. You're not serving all of these on one line. Maybe you're connecting them to each other, doing an Alicante, Valencia, Tarragona, Barcelona line. And I swear I'm gonna stop doing this. Oh, thanks. Um, so the point is that, ooh, thank you. Yeah, so the point is that this is just bad geography, but the point is that, however, in Spain as well as in France, you have a giant capital. So the largest single core urban region in Europe is Istanbul, and then it's Moscow, and then it's Moscow, and then it's London, and then and then it's Paris, which is the only city that I'm not gonna try to pronounce in the local language because Paris sounds weird. So like in the EU, let's call it, it's obviously Paris because these people made, I mean, not these people, but these people made a weird decision. And then it's not the Rhine or Randstad because these are multi-core and their individual cores are much smaller. It's actually Madrid. Um, and Barcelona might even be number three. It might actually, no, maybe not. I think there's something like, I think like Paris, Madrid, Berlin, Barcelona, and then Milan, or Milan and then Barcelona. Rome is also up there. Frankfurt. I think in Germany it go. I think in Germany the single cores go Berlin, Frankfurt, Hamburg, München. I'm forgetting whether Köln's the head of Stuttgart. Amsterdam somewhere, or Rotterdam, depending on what you count there. Um, so the point is that because Madrid can actually drive a lot of investment, and Paris same thing. And then once you go to like the North German plain, you don't have a Paris. You barely have a Madrid in Berlin, which is already kind of too far east. But have all of these cities that are so close to each other that you can create a high-speed line, even without thinking very much. Yeah, yeah. So Madrid is about 7 million. So Madrid is actually, as I understand it, pretty ambi. Incomes in Madrid and Barcelona are pretty high. In the rest of Spain, the incomes are not really first world. But Madrid and Barcelona are rich enough that people are, as I understand, people keep migrating there. So people in Barcelona think that the Madrileños are killing them, and then people in the rest of Spain think that the Madrileños and the Barcelonas are killing them. And so then you go to Eastern Europe, and to some extent you can still do the same trick because Berlin anchors a bunch, especially again, you build enough and you run the trains frequently, so it means don't even think about worse than hourly. If it's nearby, like Berlin Hamburg or something, or Berlin Stettin, every half hour you want. So something like Berlin to Warszawa, yeah, you can do that. Or do some kind of network with Łódź, Katowice. I mean, Katowice is multi-core, and this means that people drive everywhere because there's no dominant city center. So because it's so decentralized, Silesia actually has a very high driving rate, unlike Warszawa. Warszawa barely has a metro. I think it has two lines, but it has a giant tram network. It's like it's like Praga and Bratislava and Wien and Budapest, like all the V4 capitals. And yes, I know that Austria is not quite V4, but morally it's V4, especially with Oedipa's corruption levels. And so so you have capitals that are here that are big enough that you can actually build a network out of them. And again, Katowice is not nothing, even if it's very decentralized. And you have Krakow, I guess Brno, but I mean Brno, and I mean even Brno is kind of small, let alone Ostrava. So yeah, you can create a network out of these to some extent. Um, and then you go east and just look. There's nothing, right? I mean, so between Warszawa and Minsk, what's the distance between Warszawa and Minsk? This tells you that I did not actually pre-compute all of the distances and all of the travel times for World War III. Um, so this is Warszawa, and this is Minsk, and they are 477, and the only thing in between is either Białystok or Brest. Białystok, not a large city. Brest, I don't think it's a large city either. How big is how big is Lublin? Metro, yeah, long. It might actually still be the biggest in Eastern Poland. Brest, this one. This is okay, 360. And like Belarus is not a big country, so it's not like you can expect people to move there or something. If people are moving out of their villages in Belarus, it's maybe to Minsk, more plausibly to Berlin. If yeah, I mean maybe Warsaw, maybe. And what about yeah? Let's not try to spell the accent. Białystok. Yeah, it's the 10th largest city in Poland, which is 300,000 people. Yeah, that's not gonna get you much of a high-speed line. Okay. Oh, Ostrava is tiny. Oh, right, because Ostrava is an industrial city, right? I mean, I remember describing in vivid detail all of the factors that were like in the battle. Um, and so yeah, so it just isn't much between Warsaw and Minsk. And I mean, if Warsaw were the size of Paris, it wouldn't matter. If it were the size of Madrid, I don't think it would matter, but it's not. And the same, and the farther east you go, the more that. So I mean, if you go to the Baltics, they're even smaller. So yeah, you can do something to Vilnius and then string it through Riga and Tallinn, but it's long distances for tiny cities. Okay. I mean Kaliningrad, if you can get it, but Kaliningrad is not large either. Um, and then if you go east rather than northeast, so I don't know, Lublin, Lviv or something, these are not very large cities either. And then, okay, trying to go the most direct route to Kiev, that's 700 kilometers from Warsaw. You're not going to go direct because at this rate, with cities that are not that big. Do you want to pass through Brest? Maybe. Or you're gonna do Lublin, then you're gonna do some weird thing going through Lviv or through or branch through Lviv and then Rivne. But it's just these are again. So Ukraine is a country of 40 million people, give or take. Um, the birth rate in Ukraine are shit. The migration rate are also kind of shit because if you're migrating to Ukraine, you can just migrate to Poland. If you're migrating to Poland, you might as well migrate to Germany. So um, yeah, no, it would be really easy. So the construction cost would be low. Don't get me wrong. Okay, so you're building a line for I don't know 20 million euros a kilometer, maybe even 15 million euros a kilometer. That's still, I mean, not a lot of ridership you're getting out of the 15 million euros a kilometer line that you just built. Um, yeah. No, if you're building high speed rail, it's going to be without trade. It's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is that Lviv is this city. Leopolitan. A person from Lviv is called Leopolitan. What? Why are there a million different names from the city depending on what language I'm speaking? Better enough that I'm supposed to call it Lemberg because Yiddish. Except I don't actually know any Yiddish because who the hell knows Yiddish? And the year of our Jew who believed his mother when she told him it was God 2021. Okay, let me find list of cities in Ukraine. I believe the only ones that are big enough even to have a metro are Kiev, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk. Like, I don't think. Let me actually check if Odessa has a metro. Um, and you can see, like, the population, like, this is population now versus 20 years ago, and these are depopulating because, I mean, the birth rates are shit. Nobody is going to migrate to. I mean, Kiev, sure, from the rest of Ukraine, but why would you migrate to Kharkiv or to Odessa? Because you can migrate to Kiev, or if you're a foreigner, to Berlin. Um, so wait, does Odessa have a metro? And also, and it's not a bunch of cities that are on a string that can be very easily served. Is the problem public transport? Okay, so they have trams and trolley buses, but they do not have a metro, and I do not remember if Kharkiv has a metro. I know that Dnipro has a metro because somehow I found an extension that I was Uh, transport. Oh, there is a metro. It's entirely possible there is a metro and I even put an extension on the, and that's it. It's actually a pretty. Ah, okay. Okay, so the fact that the wait, why are they saying that the system is 223 here and 128 here? This is what bothers me because 128 is decent. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, on the side for the size of Kharkiv, but I mean, if it's certainly if it's 220, then I'm just gonna mock every other city forever for uh, what other languages is it gonna be in? No, no. Oh, right. It would be Russian because people in Kharkiv speak that and not Ukrainian. Um, so this is saying 100 million a year, or 140 million a year. Well, was hoping for more, but honestly, 140 million a year. I mean, like per, like, I mean, since like it's Russian, like it's Soviet style cities, so the metro area, so it's 1.4, but it's not 1.4 and then another three in suburbs. Like it's about when, like in the former Soviet Union, when they say 1.4, it's 1.4. Um, like per capita, this is, I think this might actually be, I think this beats New York. Oh, it's Corona. Corona. Oh, right. Also, yeah, Kiev, Kiev is relatively wealthy. Yeah, I mean, Pony, you live in Prague, which is relatively wealthy for Czechia, and you told me how much you pay in rent and how close to city center you live. Um, Prague is a nice city. Don't get me wrong. Prague is still, for example, poorer than Berlin, and Berlin is uh, rather, and Berlin is very much not the richest German city. This is why God put Munich on Earth, so that there would be a high income city for all the immigrants to move to, while all the CSU voters flee to the suburbs because they're afraid of seeing, because it was bad enough that they saw queer people in the city, and now they see queer people and Middle Eastern immigrants, and queer Middle Eastern immigrants are the worst. Um, as of 2020. Thank you for being very useful. Yeah, okay. So if it's Eve of Corona, yeah. So if it's Eve of Corona is 223, then yeah. Then that is 150-ish per capita, which beats every French city that is not Paris, I believe. I think it doesn't beat Hamburg, but Hamburg beats it, I think, by a pretty small margin, maybe. Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah. I think it was just, Kiev, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk. Um, which I think might actually be correctly called Dnipro at this point. It's just that also this Ukrainian city. You might want to get there, but again, it's 900,000 people living there. Also, there are certain obstacles between the rest of Ukraine and Donetsk right now. Um, removable, but people will complain about the removal. Some of these people have nuclear weapons, the complainers. Um, but yeah, so the point is that these are not cities that are very well organized on a line. They're not very large, not very close to each other. So in Ukraine, so by the time you get to this far east, you might need to take a rain check. Whereas certainly going up to Warsaw is something that you can do. And it's something, yeah, Germany is planning it. But I mean, I can get why Berlin to Warsaw is something that Poland should be planning first and foremost. Whereas here, the gaps between our network and the French one are mostly Germany's fault. Ditto. I mean, Germany to Belgium. I think it's both sides' fault. Germany to the Netherlands. I can't even tell. Germany to Switzerland, our fault. Germany to Austria, both sides' fault. Germany to Czechia, probably both sides. I think. Not that Czechia is doing this thing very well. I mean, but also again, um, Brno is small. Ostrava is small. Olomouc is small. Um, like this by itself is not a very good line. This with guaranteed connections up to Dresden and Berlin, with the Dresden also having something maybe time to Leipzig and points west, or and from Ostrava going up to Katowice, that gets more interesting. But again, it requires pan-European planning, which is not a thing right now. The Greens are starting to do this, but only for night trains rather than for concrete in the ground because that is not how travel looked in the old civilized days of the 1970s when greenhouse gas emissions were even worse than today. Um, and the non-green parties don't care. Oh, could you? Huh? I didn't realize about the underground travel. That's interesting. Okay. Anyway, the fact that I get the fact that somehow it's still recording 2.5 hours into this is a minor miracle. So I think I'm gonna stop unless people are gonna ask me questions. Again, as I said, it's about international high-speed rail, mostly Europe, a little bit not Europe. Like North America. Again, other parts of the world like Asia are really weird, mostly because Asia is a series of islands, right? Because Japan's an island. South Korea, I mean, until Kim's job is realigned with his skills, is also an island. Taiwan is an island. Oh, thanks, Color. Thanks. Glad you liked it. Uh, anyway, if anyone has questions, I will take them. I don't want to take them for too long because I'm paranoid that the recording is going to cut out. If in terms of the recording cut out anyway, I will be very sad. Nope, the recording is still going on. Very good. Do I know if ProRail managed to significantly improve the punctuality? I have no idea. Um, are there viable high-speed routes through the Balkans? Oh God, the Balkans are a nightmare. So the Balkans, so right, so in where was the population density? Here, okay, right. So where it is easy to build would be northern-ish Europe, including France, because we have high density-ish and decent terrain. And then in France, maybe the density is lower, but there's Paris. And in Spain, the density is even lower, but there's Madrid. And in France, you can even build zero tunnel. In Spain, not so much. It's cheap there. And then in Eastern Europe, it's very easy to build, but there's nothing between Warsaw and Kiev. Kiev, but Kiev. It's not divorced in Ukraine, I don't think. And then you have the Balkans. The Balkans have not. I mean, you kind of see the population density isn't great, right? I mean, this is. I mean, beyond. I mean, below. I mean, not below. South of Budapest. So when it's the actual Balkans, like former Yugoslavia, Romania, Bulgaria, you can kind of see the density is not great, and also, oh my God, mountains. This area I think developed very late because of that in the 19th century because the railways there kind of sucked. Branko Milanovic actually has a blog post about the underdevelopment of the Balkans, and he points out that yes, there are a bunch of reasons. For example, the area was communist, this delayed economic development, which is why Greece is the richest Balkan state. Maybe Slovenia at this point has overtaken it, I'm not sure, but Slovenia is also the closest to, let's say, Austrian and Italian markets. But he points out something, which is the area that became Yugoslavia back when it was called Dalmatia. I think it was called Dalmatia or Illyria, was kind of underdeveloped even in the Roman era because so he points out the richest part of the Roman Empire based on modern reconstruction was obviously Roman Italy. And then Greece. So there was the Italian core and the Greek core, which at the time it was not classical Greece. So around this it was much more Macedonian. So a lot of it came over like Trachea and so Constantinople. So Byzantium was actually a secondary city for most of this era. I think Nicomedia was the main one around here. But but this area, as the point, was the kind of second locus of Roman economic development. But in between, you would expect it would be somewhere in the middle because of the proximity, but it wasn't. And he argues that the geography possibly plays a role because the mountains rise too fast from the water. So there are no large plains, for example, where you can do agriculture. And even in Italy, which is more mountainous, it's not as mountainous. So Lazio is not the best for this, unlike, let's say, unlike what we call today northern Italy, or or if you're a fascist, Padania, and what at the time would be called Gallia Cisalpina. Um, but here they don't. Maybe right around here, but there's no. But maybe it's too mountainous for you to even have the plains of Latium and Etruria and so on. So aka Lazio and what is called and aka Lazio and Toscana. Uh, so the connection to and so there's obviously sea connections, so you do get a lot of historic development right along the coast, um, which is how you get this weird Croatian stuff where you have Dubrovnik and Split and so on. There are Croatian cities right on the water that maybe historically were connected to Venice, Rijeka, which I think until the end of World War II was in Italian city called Fiume. But they didn't have much of a connection to the hinterland. So maybe, so I don't know the exact thing that made this, and maybe it's an Austro-Hungarian thing that made this and this be Croatia, but this be Bosnia. But but they had kind of poor connections, so the interior did not have very good links to the ports, so it was underdeveloped, and this cemented itself with railways because railways do make overland connections better than overseas connections, but railways do not ignore terrain. Uh, railways railways ignore a little bit of terrain, but mountains like this are bad for railways. So the upshot is that it's not very good for high-speed rail. It's also not very urbanized for reasons that, for example, again, this area is relatively underdeveloped. Maybe it's not very good for the kind of intensive agriculture that produces Dutch population density or Northern German or Western German population density. Just a reminder, the Netherlands is a net exporter of food. So it's not just the Netherlands. Okay, so it's not like, I don't know, Singapore is very dense but does not feed itself. The Netherlands is, or it's not Singapore dense, but it's very dense and also feeds itself. I mean, it feeds itself greenhouse grown crap, but it feeds itself. And so this area maybe does not have enough density, and also for maybe the same reason it's not as economically well developed. It does not have enough. It's not good enough terrain to make this pencil out, or maybe it doesn't have, or maybe it did not historically have very large capitals. I'm pretty sure the only million plus city in the former Yugoslavia is Belgrade. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm actually gonna check. Yeah, Belgrade. Yeah, Belgrade, Sofia, Istanbul is something that's on my crayon, but it is very crayon, and the anchor especially for the Eastern Balkans has to be Istanbul, which is going to piss people off because everyone hates the Turks. Yeah, so Istanbul to Sofia will work. Why will it work? Sofia is not a large country. I mean, it will work. I mean, with a couple of asterisks, which is you need to make travel free between these places, which the Bulgarians and also the rest of Europe will hate. But or like do something, or even like find a way to hop the mountains to get to Bucharest. Bucharest is not a small city. Um, Bucharest is like what, 3 million, maybe 2.5 million. And again, Plovdiv doesn't really matter, but I mean, if you're getting to Sofia, it's pretty nice. If you can get to Thessaloniki, and then from there to drag a line down to Athens, it's not going to be the worst thing in the world. But again, the anchor is essentially the fact that this is the largest city in Europe. This is a fast-growing city because, this is a reminder, Istanbul builds 160, I believe, or 170,000 new housing units every year. Ile-de-France is about 80,000, and Ile-de-France has been on the EMB binge lately. So Istanbul, which is approaching hyper-city scale at this point, um, can drive a lot of stuff that kind of radiates from it, again, to places like Thessaloniki, to Sofia. I mean, can you get purely on the strength of Istanbul all the way up to Belgrade? I don't know. I mean, the mountains kind of suck. These are countries that loathe each other. These are countries that are not going to keep the borders open. These are countries that are not going to think long term about how to keep fares affordable. They align that should be profitable, but not profit maximizing, which is the problem of Thales and Eurostar. They're profit maximizing in the short term, as opposed to charging a little bit more than break even, like domestic TGVs, domestic ICEs, and so on. Um, and again, these are people who like each of them is going to hate the others. I mean, if you get farther, and if you get farther west, you get to people who just hate the Turks, but um, the and don't want Turkish immigration, don't want Turkish immigration of any kind. But and I say people don't want, some of the people don't want border control officials don't want, and politicians don't want, and but beyond this, again, it's hard. I mean, these are small cities. Again, Zagreb, Sarajevo. Uh, so they're not great for high-speed rail, unfortunately. And there's also not a lot of regional rail here that's very easy to modernize, which is pretty bad. I mean, there's legacy intercity rail. It's very amenable to electrification because of the terrain, but it's still going to be very slow. And it's not like Switzerland. We can do the neat thing. The population density in Switzerland core area is pretty high, so you can do Zurich to Basel, Basel to Bern, Bern to Zurich in an hour each. You can't do this for, let's say, I don't know, Zagreb, for things like Zagreb, Sarajevo, Ljubljana. Yeah. No, Belgrade is larger. But again, Belgrade is literally about to build a metro. Like, Belgrade is starting to build a metro, or starting to design a metro. One of the things that I might do, just because I have a mutual who's living there, is like try to crayon what it should look like to build Belgrade Metro. Anyway, does that answer your questions about the Balkans? Awesome. Thanks. Are there other questions? I mean, from Belgrade, you can even get to Budapest. I mean, Belgrade is so. If Serbia had, so let me just put it this way. So if Serbia were, so my suspicion is that and my answer about Serbia, if it had both the incomes and the politics of, let's say, Czechia or Slovakia, would be that it's servable. But it's poorer than Czechia by a lot, and it's a country that, in theory, is trying to join the EU, but also secretly wants to join Russia. So stuff like or like not being nuts about the border, or keeping or having like long-term planning around an integrated network might be difficult. And again, at the beyond Belgrade level, you're getting okay. Bulgaria, I don't think they would mind, but Istanbul. I mean, remember you guys remember the meme remove kebab? Remove kebab is literally them is not like people mocking. It's not originating people mocking racists. Remove kebab is originally a Serbian nationalist song complaining that calling the Bosnians Turks as a slur. Morocco, Spain. I know there are people who are planning it. Like, I think one of the people who was involved in the construction of or in the design of the Gotthard-based tunnel. I think it's the same person who came up with the idea of making it not straight but a little bit bent to get better rock. He proposed a tunnel that's not quite Gibraltar. So the tunnel would not be literally here because um, my head is on the left, right? Right, my head is on the left, so look right and see the elevation. So because this is a very narrow place, just as a matter of fluid dynamics, when you have a narrower opening, the speed of the flow has to be higher to compensate for constant flow rate. And this carves a very deep channel. For the same reason, if you, in general, when you have very narrow openings, let's say the San Francisco Bay or I think it's the Verrazano Narrows, certainly the Bosporus, they tend to be very deep, deeper than the surroundings. So you can kind of see here that at the narrowest, it's things that go down. I think if you try to go Gibraltar to Ceuta, Yeah, you can you see that you're going past 900 meters? So I think the plan was actually to bypass Gibraltar entirely and go from Barbate to Tangier, which is only minus 300. Only that's still going to be so much more difficult than anything built so far, but it's at least buildable with current technology. It's not just some kind of factoring speculation. It's going to be a much longer tunnel, this versus this, or even this, but it's again, but you're not going 900 meters below ground. Where here you need to suspend the tunnel. That's not technology that currently exists. It's technology people keep talking about, but does not exist. This again, if this were technologically feasible, which it is, just the cost is unclear, that might be interesting. But again, there's the border issue where it's Morocco, and if you're trying to fly from Morocco to Europe, uh, you're required to have a return ticket, and you're not guaranteed a visa, and all these hostile environment things that make it very clear that if you're Moroccan, you're not fully human. The one nice thing, by the way, is that there is a high speed line to connect to because this is high speed. Like Morocco has high speed rail. Morocco actually has the world's lowest high speed rail construction costs because they built a trench style, and it's actually pretty easy to run. Like the connection between them is going to kind of suck. Yeah, the strait's too deep. You could go around the strait, but you're still minus 300 as opposed to minus 900 and minus 300 again. I mean, I think the channel is like minus 50. I think maybe not the channel, the one in Japan, called the Seikan tunnel. I think the one is minus 70, minus 80. Um, no, this is a lot deeper than I thought. Okay. Yeah, so this is 140 and this is below that. Huh. Okay, so it's actually pretty close. Huh, I didn't realize. Okay. But even then, I mean, this is 140, we're talking 300. Um, and also, I think it's also going to be wider if you want to do 300-ish as opposed to 900, right? Because we were saying Tangier, like something like this. No, actually, it might be comparable actually to Saigon, but again, still a lot deeper. Um, and also, there's no Tokyo inside. Remember, the second tunnel so severely underperforms ridership expectations because because at the time they planned it, people didn't really fly in Japan. By the time they opened it, they did. Um, I mean, I'm craning that because I believe in like Euro NATO. Like, I mean, from in America they keep talking about like from California to New York or something, or like mentioning all the places. So for me, it's from I don't know Orkney or from Svalbard or from Iceland down to Malta and Cyprus and east to Ukraine. Russia will deal with later. So because Ireland is um, so Brits have been planning that for I don't know 150 years. I don't know. So from Holyhead to Dublin, that's been planned for a long while. I mean, there were plans for the Channel in the 19th century. So this is very long, 100. But let's go over. So you see that it's not terribly deep. It's actually shallower than Saigon. Um, I don't know what the shallowest point of it is because I'm barely even crayoning on Google. So you can get to maybe minus 99 even by the Holyhead route. Right now, so Britain is currently obsessed with trying to figure out a tunnel from Scotland to Northern Ireland because of some colonial bullshit about Northern Ireland uh, currently being in the customs union or something because otherwise the IRA would be sad. Um, but the main road would be something like you branch off of high speed two around here, and it's not going to connect or anything interesting on the way because Brits don't roll that way. And then this is actually not terrible terrain. Northern Line. I mean, not perfectly flat, but probably do this above ground. This is a tunnel, as if like a few kilometers of tunnel matter at that scale. And then something like this would be 100 kilometers of tunnel to Dublin. If that's feasible, yeah, it's feasible. Fine. So Dublin is not the largest city out there. Um, so Dublin, so if we're doing this, it's 260, and then this to London is going to be, yes, it's about a little more than 500 kilometers. And high speed 2 is going to be planned, is going to be built with speed as the primary uh, goal over as a primary goal, even more than, let's say, cost effectiveness. So they're not going to make the trains go via Birmingham. They're doing a lot of bypasses, kind of like kind of like a lot like the Railway Mania, where they were doing these lousy bypasses that at the time had no ridership and today are really important main lines like the Trent Valley. And so I bet that they can do this in 2 hours, and if not, then 2.5 is going to be unremarkable. Um, so lots of people are going to ride this, and let's remind ourselves. Wait, why am I sharing my email? Let's remind ourselves where. Okay, worlds. Wait, what is it? We're still recording the not air, air, not air city pair. So Dublin, London. Okay, so this is. Oh, right, because this is a single airport. The whole point is that people fly from Dublin to like all London airports. Yeah, so it's 5 million London, Dublin, London. Um, imagine quite a lot of it is connecting, but that might not be a problem because it's something like at the outer end of high speed rail. Let's call it 4 hours. People are probably just going to fly if they're flying for a connection. But even at 3 hours, I mean, some people do take the train from Marseille to Charles de Gaulle, and at 2 hours, it's very common. I mean, Lyon barely even has an airport. Honestly, even, I mean, Marseille barely does either. But I mean, people might use Nice or something, which is, I guess, also kind of far. Um, but what just happened? Oh, right, I closed Google. Is what happened. So the point is that the 2.5 hours Dublin to London. Let's not forget via Old Oak Common with a good Crossrail connection that's going to open very soon, any decade now, to Heathrow. Um, yeah, but it's not going to be on the through train. The whole point of high speed two is that they're not planning it around any kind of German frequency area or Swiss frequency area. They're planning it as a point to point French thing. It's just at higher frequency because the cities are a lot bigger. So, for example, Birmingham is actually going to be in a branch. There's going to be this weird Birmingham interchange, and then something about trains from Birmingham to Manchester, and like they're doing this weird thing in the same way that in France, Paris Lyon trains don't go further to Marseille, and Paris Marseille trains don't stop at Lyon, which means that the frequency between Lyon and Marseille leaves something to be desired. Um, yeah, so high speed two is not just one TPH. So high speed two is like especially in the busier cities, it's going to be more than that. So London to Birmingham is I think 3 TPH supposed to be at full build out. Um, which is fine. I mean, they could do. I mean, at that distance, honestly, even six DPH would be noticeably better. But I can see why they did three. The main reason I'm against the way that they're building. Uh, yeah, and then so the point is that because Birmingham is on a branch, they're doing this thing where trains from London to Birmingham go back and forth between London and Birmingham, and then trains from London to Manchester uh, run nonstop between London and Manchester, or London and Liverpool, same thing. Like London, like the fact that Manchester and Liverpool are just crosswise to the main line. That's, I mean, a geographical problem. It's just like other than the geographical problem, Britain, and I don't mean England, I mean Britain, is perfect for high speed rail. The fact that it does, I mean, the fact that it didn't invent it, that France had to invent it in Europe, like bring it from Japan, and the fact that it still doesn't do it, like all of these things are deep impugnment of British transport planning, to the point that by now they're spending, what is it, with the Open Charter Review, 90 billion quid, I think, on something that should probably cost, I don't know, 10 billion quid, 12 billion quid. 20 billion quid, I would be worried about cost control already. And it still has an above water benefit cost ratio. That's how insanely good Britain is with its geography for high speed rail. It's just not been built. But the problem is that it's not going to be like very convenient to do on one train, London, Birmingham, Dublin. Again, I think it was a mistake for them. What I think it should have done was take take a hit of like even 10 minutes. Beyond 10 minutes, I would agree with them, but I think it can be done with a delay of 10, maybe even a bit less. No, I mean 10-ish. To do London, Birmingham, and then instead of doing this weird thing where they're planning to go to, I'm forgetting where, to Curzon Street or New Street. I think it's the historic station whose name I do not remember. Is the current one Curzon Street? This is more street, so it's not that. New Street, right? So they mean Curzon Street. So they're planning on going here and building a new station here at a cost of, I believe, 1 billion quid. Because they do not want to go via here, which is an actual through station. Because they think that they don't have enough platforms there. They do, they just don't use them very efficiently. And then do something like this, and then do a short tunnel without a station, which is fine because you're no longer in city center, so it's not as expensive. And then you go back to the main line, which otherwise should be zero tunnel. And then figure out, and then split. And again, this hill is irrelevant to high speed rail planning purposes. And then you go up to Manchester and then Liverpool, and I can see the theory split of Manchester, Liverpool, and then trains going through to uh, Scotland. Then maybe from Manchester, I want to go on to Leeds or something. That's important to the through service. If you really want, you can try to do this kind of weird thing where the things that just got de-scoped because of the construction cost problem that they were planning to do Birmingham to East Midlands to Sheffield to Leeds. But anyway, the point is that even without that, Dublin is a pretty big city. Dublin is, I don't know, the size of Manchester maybe, or Liverpool. And I mean, yeah, it's going to be a little farther from London, but it's not a big deal. It's still 2 hours, 2.5 hours from London. Yeah, that gets ridership. There's a lot of ridership. And you can even, I mean, they're not going to do it because they don't think that way, but in theory, they could do a good train-to-train connection somewhere for trains to Paris. And then that's flip, I don't know, 4 point something hours, depending on whether they can whether they can avoid bullshit security and border control. But again, first of all, you need to avoid the security bullshit and the border control bullshit. You can see Britain not do the border control bullshit with Ireland. The security bullshit, it's Britain. It's the world's CCTV capital. Yeah, so it's 5 million. Remember, it's five. I mean, yeah, I know. I mean, the whole point they re-uploaded this is not uploaded. Reloaded this is that it's 5 million people between London and Dublin. It's about the same as Moscow to St. Petersburg. No, I'm saying Moskva and St. Petersburg as opposed to Moskva and St. Petersburg. Or London, Edinburgh is pretty big, and like a lot of, so actually a lot of the environmental case for RSP2 is something that does not accrue until you go all the way up to Scotland, because nobody flies from London to Birmingham or London to Manchester, so you need to go very far up to have enough of a travel time benefit to kill the London to Edinburgh / Glasgow air market. Again, England is very dense. I mean, Scotland's close enough to England, it's not a big deal, but Scotland is not as dense, so it's not so London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, and then crickets. crickets, crickets. I voted Brexit. Crickets, crickets. Crickets. I admire. I like the SNP. They are a very progressive party who who don't do anything. Crickets. Finally said these. So anyway, I don't know the construction cost of this 100 kilometers of tunnel underwater because I can estimate. I mean, so here's an insane fact. Okay, I mean, at normal underground cost, I do not know if it's obtainable underwater, but normal underground cost is this as 100 kilometers and not terribly deep. That uh, is I don't know $15 billion maybe. Um, so this plus this is a second order. Or, I mean, not nothing, but second like so this together might be I don't know $20 billion on top of high speed DSL. Um, it's just a British construction cost, I think. Um, so again, is this going to work? Maybe. I don't know. A lot of it depends on Britain stopping being assholes about your integration. Edinburgh is small, but Glasgow is not as small. London Edinburgh is on the East Coast Main Line, but London Glasgow is West Coast Main Line, and the current plan, which is actually very sensible, is to bag the distinction between two competing north-south lines and just go on the busier one, which is West Coast, and then when you go sufficiently far up, even today, East Coast from you can go up the West Coast Main Line from London to Edinburgh, um, and so that's, for example, if you're going to go from Birmingham or from Manchester, Edinburgh, you're going to go on the West Coast Main Line, and then there's a branch. It's slower from London than the East Coast, but not by much, as I understand it. And if you go high speed all the way, even up to Manchester, this becomes a preferred route. Um, and certainly, if you go, so the plan is to go high. So the plan, or at least was at one point, to go high speed all the way and then split. I think at this point the plan is only to go. Instead of saying I think, let's do since I'm already on Wikipedia. Okay, so including things that so currently the plan is gonna be to just go up to Crewe or something, and even this is gonna make the West Coast the faster route uh toward what's it called toward Edinburgh. And again, it's about both Edinburgh and Glasgow. I mean, they have plans here. Britain has construction cost problems. Britain is not the American amateur hour where I can literally read literally everything that they write and point out egregious errors. Here, for example, they're actually telling you in advance what the schedule is going to look like. So when the whole thing is open, 3 TPH London to Birmingham, 3 London to Manchester, 1 to what the hell is Macclesfield? The Cheshire town of Macclesfield. Um, okay, okay, London, okay, okay. So so one a train. So the Cheshire Cut train, 2 trains per hour that go to Liverpool, I guess. Uh, and then is it going to be the same train that just it is unclear to me whether they're doing 2 trains an hour to Liverpool or just one. Uh, and of which, yeah, either way, train. But anyway, a train every half a train every hour goes to Lancaster, or Lancaster. And then 2 trains per hour go to Edinburgh and Glasgow, and they actually split the train. They don't do interesting. It's not going to be every hour to Edinburgh, every hour to Glasgow. Huh. So another So now that they care about frequency enough that they're going to divide a train rather than do a train every hour, which is kind of weird because Preston and Carlisle not terribly important. So it's not even about frequency on a on an intermediate thing. It's basically just about frequency from London to Scotland, and that's going to be a train that's divided rather than split, so that it's going to be every hour to a destination. Interesting, because what they probably should have been doing is then, if they care so much about a train every 30 minutes to Glasgow rather than every hour, that they should care probably about it more than just a train every 20 minutes to Birmingham, because it's going to be like 3 hours, because they're only going to build half the high speed line. Whereas London to Birmingham, I think it's supposed to be 40 minutes. Plus a bunch of things from Birmingham. Oh, right. And you see here from, oh, this is already short trains. Okay, so that's why they're not going to divide the train. Um, so this was a map. I think there are exact trip times. So London to Birmingham, they're going to cut from an hour 22 to, oh, not 40, 52. London to Manchester, an hour 11. London to Glasgow is only going to be, it's not even going to be 3 hours. It's going to be 3:40. Ugh. And they still care at 3:40 about a train every half hour, not an hour, whereas at 52, they're okay with a train every 20 minutes. That's kind of weird. Anyway, are there any other questions before I meander about my opinions about intercity rail planning in Britain? These two numbers don't add up to this. You can't see. These two numbers do not add up to this number. I do not know why. If you're wondering why I'm weirdly late, it's because my old phone is not in night mode, so I have more than I have more than why does it say 3 viewers? I have more than 3 viewers literally um participating right now. Anyway, are there any other questions? Because we're already past the 3 hour mark, and I was hoping to end after 2 hours 30, and I'm surprised the recording has not informed me that my computer is out of room. Probably my target is to end it at 3:10, maybe a little less than that. Or maybe I should be less numerological uh, about the lengths. At lengths. Okay, it's G. Um, if there aren't any, I'm going to give this a little bit more time because, like, I don't know, you're seventh, you're right or something, because you guys are lagging. I mean, there's always a little bit of lag, so I don't want to say, hey, are there questions? And then by the time you finish typing the questions, toodles. So Yeah, I'm gonna give it, I guess, another minute and then cut if there are no more questions. Bring me through 8. It's not quite as neurological. It's 310. I mean, the numerology is that sometimes when I watch the YouTube videos, it's never multi-hour YouTube videos. It's like a StarCraft game or something of like 20 something minutes, 30 something minutes. I sometimes try to compute the number in total seconds and then try to figure out if it is prime or if it has many interesting or if it's a smooth number instead. Like smooth means divide that is divisible only by very small primes. Like 2 times a large prime is not a prime, but it's also not smooth. 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, like powers of these low numbers or smooth numbers. So if there are no questions, then thanks for watching. Uh, Thanks for bearing me for such a long and very unusually meandering even for me thing. And I will see you in a week with another video. So ciao ciao.